Test, test. I think we're about ready to go. Hope everybody's doing great. Got Big Movie ready to go. He's going to be calling in. It's going to be a good time. All right, a little afternoon. We'll see what's going on. All right, 3, 2, 1. Try again. It is Thursday afternoon, East Lansing, Michigan. Come on in, gather around, gather around, gather around. My name is Jim Comparoni, publisher, SpartanMAG.com, special Thursday afternoon edition. Not necessarily because we have any breaking news. It's just when it fell for us to do it this particular week. It's been a busy week, as everybody knows. Tuesday was busy. We usually do it on Tuesday night. But Thursday this week, we didn't want to wait till Thursday night. The Michigan State Coaches Radio Show will be coming up tonight. Didn't want to go against that. Harlan Barnett will be the host of that, or be the, whatever you call it, the guest host, whatever it is. So we didn't want to go against that. And we want to get these things out as far away from game day as possible. Thursday's a little late in the week, not ideal. But we appreciate everybody coming in and tuning in. Spartan Mag Live on a Thursday afternoon. Thanks for taking time out of your afternoon. Those of you in the Central Time Zone, happy noon hour. Happy late morning. Those of you on the West Coast, happy 1 o'clock afternoon. Good afternoon. Those of you in Michigan and the Eastern Time Zone. Again, SpartanMAG.com, publisher Jim Comparoni, been publishing SpartanMAG.com since the beginning of the internet, basically. Published Spartan Magazine, the print version, going back to 1993. Appreciate all the Michigan State fans that have supported us over the years. Big news week with Mel Tucker. Everybody knows that. A lot of drama, a lot of soap opera stuff. Some he said, she said, some contract law mixing in there. University protocol, Title IX implications. Everybody knows the story of that. Don't expect to, I'm not expecting to really comment a bunch on that. I was just on the Tim Stout Show in Lansing, had a couple of comments there. Most of my comments have been taking place during the course of the week over on SpartanMag.com at the Underground Bunker message board at SpartanMag.com. In the meantime, give us a like right here. Subscribe to this channel. Go over to SpartanMag.com and become a SpartanMag.com subscriber. We would love to have you there.
Call from
Big Move.
To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail, press 2.
I don't know if we've got Moob on or not. Hey, Ron, can you hear me?
Call from
Big Move.
I think we lost him. I'm not sure why. Oh, let's see. Is this... I'm going to have to ask him to try again. Apologize about this. I'm not sure why the digit wasn't working. There's a number that I have to push on this to get it to work, and was not working. But anyway, we got Ron Armstrong, former Michigan State football player, card-carrying Spartan Dog for Life member. And we will be talking football. Michigan State getting ready to play Washington this Saturday. We will take questions from the mailbag over at SpartanMag.com, and also questions over here in the comment area.
Big Move.
To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail, press 2.
I think it worked. Not working. We might just have to start this thing over. Not sure why it's...
Call from
Big Move.
It's been like
to
that
accept,
this week.
press 1. To send a voicemail, press 2.
I'm going to have to... this is what happens when you do things in the afternoon. Anyway, we do not edit here. We do not have a producer. So these things happen. I'm just going to turn off the phone and start it again. I'm not sure what happened. That's the old... I don't know if that'll help or not. Anyway, everybody knows about Mel Tucker and what happened this week. Last night I was watching film of Michigan State versus Richmond, going over film, as they call it, and just taking notes on Michigan State's players and backup players, just to have a better idea of who's coming along, where they rank in the depth chart, who's making progress. And every time they showed Mel Tucker on the sideline, thanks for the messages about trying to call him. That doesn't work. We've tried that before. Every time they showed Mel Tucker on the sideline, I mean, I get this sadness for him. You know, I know he did this to himself. He trusted somebody, and he allowed himself to get into this situation. I don't want to talk more about that or put anyone else on trial about this. But I just, as a person, I knew him, got to know him pretty well professionally. He was always very nice to me and to us at SpartanMAG. And he had a chance to do real well at Michigan State. Had some situations that needed to be overcome here and there. Then this comes up, and of course, that he's not going to be coaching at Michigan State anymore. But I felt some sadness for him. Felt some sadness. Some of you might say maybe he doesn't deserve it. Some of you definitely might think that he deserves it. But I'm just telling you, that's my truth. That's what I felt for him when I see him on the sidelines. And I suspect some of you, when you see video clips of past Michigan State games and they show video of him, I suspect some of you will feel that way for him also. I know there's some anger also, and just remains to be seen what becomes of his career after this and what happens with the hearing in early October. And after that hearing takes place, we won't hear much about it in the days following, other than possibly hearing who was actually at the hearing. It's my understanding that then the attorney that oversees it will take 3 or 4 weeks to come up with a decision, some sort of ruling. And then from there can be appeals and so forth. But in terms of Michigan State going forward, it's clear Michigan State's going forward without Mel Tucker. Harlan Barnett is obviously interim head coach, and he's got a chance to make a run to try to win this job. That's his intentions. This is his dream. I think for this season, the team is in good hands. I think they're behind him. And, of course, Mark D'Antonio coming to help and assist as well. Harlan Barnett, what does he need to do to keep the job? We can talk about that a little bit more as we move along. We got questions over the SpartanMAG.com underground bunker message board. SpartanMAG.com has been covering Michigan State sports since the beginning of the internet, usually a lot more smoothly than what's been going on so far here today, but we appreciate all the SpartanMAG subscribers for being a part of it. Also, over at Underground Bunker Message Board, I invited Michigan State fans to post questions. We will be fielding those questions here today. Let's try this again.
Call from.
Big move.
To accept, press 1. To send a voice.
It's just, I think it might have worked. Big Movie, are you there?
Yes, sir.
We got it to work. The old trick of just turning it off and turning it back on. Been doing that since early 90s, and once in a while it works. I apologize. Embarrassing for me, but not the first time I've been embarrassed on the air. But Ron Armstrong,
Hey, no worries.
Ron Armstrong, Big Movie, frequent contributor and good friend and an esteemed colleague, someone whose expertise and viewpoints on things I truly appreciate and value. And he's on the show with us today. Those of you that watch SpartanMAG Live on a regular basis, no stranger to Big Movie. He also comments over at SpartanMAG.com underground bunker message board. We love meeting up with him over there. As a matter of fact, met up with Ron on Sunday when a lot of this was going down, compared notes, kept an eye on things, and we've been talking throughout the week. It's been a tumultuous week. Ron, I didn't go deep into the Mel Tucker situation. I opened with it. Of course, that's the big news subject, and that's what sparked a lot of interest in the shakeup. Obviously, at Michigan State right now, regionally and nationwide. But we're going to talk some football here today. But before we get into that, your thoughts on the transition and what's going on at Michigan State, if you want to put any comments out there right now.
I think at this point, I don't know if there's much left to be said, that's not already out there. It's a tough situation for Michigan State to find themselves in, our football program to be in. But you know what? We got a game to play Saturday. So I'm sure, folks over at the building have already turned the page of football. I think that's, what most of us should do, because at the end of the day, we have no say or control over any of the other stuff. So let's just talk some ball.
They 100% have turned the corner over there. And I've said this earlier in the week. I was impressed when I was over at the Michigan State football parking lot on Sunday. I went over there just to see what was going on, to see if anything. Frankly, I was wondering if Alan Haller might be going over the building and when. As it turned out, he went over there at 3 o'clock. I was over there a little bit earlier, just being a reporter, keeping an eye on things. And while I was over there, I saw many Michigan State players coming out. They had some meetings that morning, spoke with a couple of them, and they were not. If you hadn't known that major news had dropped, they were not showing it on their faces or their dispositions. They were coming out. They did some work. I spoke with them a little bit, and they were just moving on. So Monday, when Harlan Barnett was introduced as interim head coach, he made the comment young people are resilient. They're just battling through. And when we had our first day of practice, I looked out there and they're just ready to get back to work. That's kind of what I saw on Sunday in the afternoon over at the parking lot and talking with them a little bit. So I'm not surprised that the beginning of the practice week was apparently pretty constructive, instructive, and positive from the player standpoint. So that part of it, they need to be in place because here comes Washington, number 8 team in the country, number 1 offense in the country, number 1 pass offense in the country, lethal combination of elite receivers. Odunze, I think I saw a ranking on On3 the other day, the number 2 receiver in the country behind Marvin Harrison, and McMillan is the number 10 receiver in the country. You got 2 of the top 10 receivers in the country, arguably. Odunze is a first-round draft choice, and arguably the best passing quarterback in the country. And an offensive system at Washington that gets you leaning and looking this way and hitting you back the other way, and they spring people open with new looks in trades and motions to get a lot of smoke and mirrors going. And then they've got some quick hitting route concepts. Some are ball control, some are deep shots, and that ball comes out quickly. Michael Penix, veteran, very good quarterback mind, very good system, very good receivers, and when it comes out of his hand, it's a laser, making all the throws, as they say, from the left hash, 17-yard out, as good as anybody in the country, as good as anybody in college football in recent years. A laser, accurate, and 17 yards, 12 yards, 17 yards, 30 yards, 12 yards, touchdown, over and over and over. Now, that's been against Tulsa and Boise State. Not a couple of teams that are not too bad in terms of the mid-majors, but that's the way it was all last season, and they're better at it this season. So Michigan State, with all that it's facing right now, has a gargantuan test. The best passing outfit in the country going against what has been, statistically, for the last 2 years, one of the worst pass defenses in the country at Michigan State. Michigan State's pass defense has been better this year against weak competition. We've seen some improvements, some changes. Now they're going to see the real deal, and it's going to be an ultra test. I've said all year, before all this happened, if they play really well against Washington, and maybe even beat Washington, then I will change this statement. But to me, the litmus test is next week against Maryland. That will determine that will show whether you're headed toward a 5-7 season, 6-6, 7-5, or something better, is how they play against Maryland. This one is a huge test, a chance to really shock people. But what is expected in Vegas is for Washington to come out, throw for about 425, score about 40 points, win by 15 or 16. Huge test, Ron. Sorry about that long preamble. I'm just setting it up. But Michigan State's going to be jacked up and as wired and as focused as they possibly can be.
For sure. I mean, look, the number one thing with the team is, clear out all the distractions. Whatever's going on with Coach Tucker is going to be, and that's going to be what it is. You got to focus on the task at hand, and I'm sure the preparation, going into the game has been, hyper-focused. But, yeah, like you talked about, I mean, Michael Penix, man, I said it, is probably the most accurate passer Michigan State's played, this side of Drew Brees or C.J. Stroud. I mean, the kid just is incredibly accurate. They have a great system. I went back and I watched some Indiana film a couple years ago. We played them in 2019 just to kind of see how he played against a different style of defense. We were on a previous staff there, and we ran a little bit different looks than we do now. If getting him into trouble, it didn't. At one point he had completed 20 straight passes, a variety of different passes. Some short, like you said, some short, some a couple bang aids where he just it's on the upfield shoulder. He just rips the throws in there. And I talked about something. I think sometimes. He can catch DBs off guard. Like they think that their guy's covered. There's no way the ball's coming over here. And you look up and touch way. It's on the money. I mean, those are pro throws that the windows in the NFL are much smaller. And you're not going to get guys wide open. You got to hit that throw anyway. And I mean, that's what he's doing now. So for Michigan, we talked about this last week. You got to have ball controlled offense. And I mean, just make him go to leap to the field. But you're right. I mean. I caution everybody, the guy's going to throw. He's a pro. He's got first-round receivers. And besides, nobody, I mean, outside of Georgia's defense, nobody's shutting anybody down this day and age of college football. Mm-hmm. You saw what happened to Alabama. It's just nobody's shutting anybody down. What you can try to do is, get caught, timely turnovers. Take advantage of the new clock rules, possess, ball control, and, pick your spots to take shots yourself. But it's a gargantuan task, but, there's a path to victory. I mean, like I said, it just, stay in the game, don't, like last year, we lost the game in the first 3 minutes, or whatever that was. We were, you blink and it's 16-0 or whatever the case was. And now you're fighting an uphill battle. For this week in this game, I talked about it before. They went on a run against Boise, and it was 28. They scored 28 points in the second quarter, and that game was over. So, the longer we can hang around, the more game pressures on Washington, the more throws that Penix has to make that matter, the better for us. We can't go out and try to win the game in the first quarter and, ride. I know we're going to be really emotional, but the key is to try to lock in and focus early and stay in the game and see where we're at in the fourth quarter.
Mm-hmm. First things first, Michigan State will be jacked to the moon. Michigan State fans are going to be jacked up. That just because it's a 5 o'clock game, because it's a big game, and all that has happened. I'm sensing Michigan State fans banding together. I think a lot of Michigan State fans out there are tired of hearing about coverage of their university this week and the manner in which, in some ways, do you want to say dragged through the mud or whatever? I think it's been overboard. Some of the things. I mean, I'll just editorialize a little bit. I mean, people. I heard this dim-witted person on a national radio talk show talking about, what does a Michigan State degree even mean anymore? This person was saying, and I'm thinking to myself, dude, I went to journalism school 30 years ago. This has nothing to do with my degree. What happened with one football coach and a phone relationship, and that's what it was. I don't want to get into that anymore. But to say that what it means to my degree or to people's degrees out there, and this has nothing to do with me waving green and white pom-poms. I don't do that. I have stadium imagery behind me, but this is about the academic institution. Has nothing to do with that. Does it have anything to do with the image? Yes. When you look back at the 1990s, those of us on the outside, for instance, when UNLV basketball was getting in trouble a lot, what did we think of UNLV as an institution? It does damage that nationally, and I'm aware of that. But it suggests that someone's degree doesn't mean as much anymore. And to someone who has family members at Michigan State right now and, paying money for kids to go to Michigan State, I will do that and continue to do that. It has nothing to do with the green and white pom-poms, but gone overboard to rip on the academic institution and what goes on in the classrooms over there. Completely different than what has happened here. But I think there's a lot of Michigan State fans out there that are sick of that garbage that's being talked about, and that will help them get and there'll be a release at a football game on Saturday that will be a town hall extravaganza in some ways, and they need support because this visiting team is outstanding. So the crowd is going to be riled up to the gills. The Michigan State football team will be as well, and that would have an impact that would have more of an impact, in my opinion, if this were a game against a physical opponent, a phone booth opponent. If you were playing Iowa this weekend or, the old Wisconsin or Minnesota, good teams, but if it came down to winning collisions, that fever would have more of an impact on the game than this particular style of game. This particular style of game, they're going to see a passing attack like they've not seen since last year, with the possible exception of Ohio State. So there is, you got to play 100 miles an hour and win collisions and so forth, but there's going to be a lot of smoke and mirrors and window dressing and the importance of being on the same page and doing it with loud crowd noise, because at home, the crowd noise is when you're on defense and a young and talented secondary getting their first real major test. And so the atmosphere and the energy would work more against a different opponent. It might not have a huge impact on this opponent. Although, when you listen to the Washington press conferences, they are asking their coaches about being in a hostile environment. They don't see a lot of those out there, except when they play at Oregon. They were asked about playing on grass. They lost 2 games last year, both on grass. So they're asking them about some of those intangibles. Your thoughts about some of those intangibles and any impact they could have on a game, and especially one of this that is more speed and finesse oriented.
I think you're partially right. I think being jacked up, for this game, that should provide some extra juice for that offensive line, to come out and establish something early. Especially you can get an early 3 and out and get the ball and have the offensive line go out there and set the tone with the run game and put some pressure on Washington, with some long drives that they have. Because once that crowd gets going, and if we can get out to a lead and make it difficult for them, sure. I mean, and then the one thing we haven't talked about is, isn't this the first game that they're going to have some cold sodas flowing in the stadium?
There will be refreshments available.
Yeah. I thought this is the first one, that they'll have some have the refreshments going. So I think that'll add an extra bit of juice, especially in a game where where like you said, the fans are we all can use a release. I mean, we are all ready for football and just to get our minds off of all whatever we got going in our lives, as well as what's happened this week. So I think folks are just glad there's a game. Man, 5 o'clock kick, man, it's going to last a long time for the fan base to get lathered up. Mm-hmm. And, as the old boss would say, let the lion out of the cage. So, I'm excited, man. I think, it's a big opportunity. We have some young talented players. So I think folks are just glad there's a game. How guys are going to respond to the moment. But I think skill-wise, I think we have some guys that they're going to find out that they can play at this level. It's just a matter of focus, locking in early. Just kind of in a way. I mean, I think you want the guys to calm down. I don't think you want them. That just burns through a lot of energy early. So I think the quicker we can get guys to settle in and calm down and focus on the task at hand, the better off we'll be moving forward. But it's a monumental task. Washington's a great offense. They said before their system is they execute it well. They have some built-in counters. I mean, it's just a well-oiled pass machine. But there's some ways. If I'm defending those guys, I try to I'm going to mix in some rush 3, drop 8. A few maybe some inside blitzes. We talked about that before. That in the film I watched on Michael Penix, man, if you try. Sees those, he diagnoses the outside pressure so well.
If you try to what? We lost you there for a second. If you try to what? I'm sorry?
If you try to, he's so quick at diagnosing those things. He just throws right into the blitz. Okay, Actually, the one thing on film I didn't see him handle well is, inside pressure from the 3-tech. Mm-hmm. So if you can get that 3-tech in his lap, I mean, that's with any quarterback, but most especially this guy, if you can get that 3-tech in his lap, just to get him off his spot, that helps our DBs. Then perhaps it helps our DNs, because if he has to drift back, and because of interior pressure, he's actually drifted back into the DN's path. So for me, man, the 3-tech, that's who's ever in our 3-tech, or if we're going 30 front, we're playing a 0. Mm-hmm. Who's ever our interior lineman, they got to push that pocket back into his lap. Now, part of the problem is the ball comes out so fast.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of 3-step drops, the ball's out of there. So, so then you got to go high hands if you're the D-line to try to bat some, tips and overthrows. We got to get those. So, it's really going to be a technical game. Lock in on your technique, lock in on your alignment assignment, and discipline is going to be the things that are going to carry the day for us. And at the end of the day, see where we're at and with and put some pressure on their defense. Mm-hmm. Someone posted that defense isn't, it's 89th or something other. I mean, it's not a world-class defense. So there's going to be some plays to be made for our offense. So this isn't a free lunch for those guys. They're going to have to play against us too. And I think, the key for us is just controlling the ball, take some shots when they're there. But this isn't a game where personally, I don't want to see us going up tempo on offense. I just, unless the game gets away from us and you got to do those type of things. But early on, I don't see the need for tempo, man. Second, you get a first down, you get 8 yards on the ground. You got 2 downs, you get 2 yards. I do not want to see
in 80 seconds. In 80 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the four corners offense, man. We're slowing this thing down. Like I said, take advantage of the clock rules. You can get out of the first quarter with, 7-0, and Washington's only had the ball 1 time. So that's the path. And, and try to, if you got some unscouted looks, I'm sure there's going to be some different wrinkles this weekend that Washington probably hadn't seen on film the last 3-4 years. So, when you get those opportunities that you hit them with some unscouted looks, you got to take advantage of those as well.
All right, rewinding a little bit to some of the points you were making, the three technique is so important if Michigan State rushes three and drops eight, or if they play their base. Simeon Barrow, a very good player, has been, owning his foxhole all season, but maybe it hasn't really shown up in the backfield a lot yet. Your thoughts on Simeon Barrow? Meanwhile, Dre Butler, the third-string transfer, has been making some athletic plays here and there. Your thoughts about Barrow and whether he can come alive in this game? Have you been watching him closely the first 2 weeks? What are your thoughts there?
I don't think he's played a lot of. I think they've been saving a lot of those guys. I don't think they've played enough snaps, in terms to really get a good read. I think sometimes with D linemen, as the game goes on, they kind of tune into the cadence of the quarterback. They pick up keys that the offensive linemen have when the ball's going to be snapped. Things like that you pick up when you've been in there, you played a ton of snaps. So, I think this game you'll see a more active Simeon Barrow. I think some of the looks that we may have had to free him up inside, we probably weren't calling. So I guarantee you he's going to be ready to go, and you'll see 8 flash quite a bit. Now, as far as 45, that guy's going to. I guarantee. I'm staking my name to that 45 is going to make some plays this weekend. He's just showing up on film. He pops every time he's out there. So I'm looking forward to it. I think this is a game where athletes show out, and I think and that interior line 45 is an athlete. And I expect him to make some plays this weekend. We're talking about Dre Butler. I expect him to make some plays this weekend as well.
You talk about athletes showing out, and what comes to mind in that regard when you are a 15-point underdog, or let's say for argument's sake, I think it might have been a 17-point underdog on this particular occasion. 1998, the Horseshoe, Columbus, Ohio. Michigan State had a lot of problems playing number one team in the country, Ohio State. They were loaded. Ohio State was the big favorite to win the national championship, the first national championship since 1968 that year. Michigan State went down there with a big upset, and players that became NFL players that we had no idea were NFL players, Ronaldo Hill, Julian Peterson, on that day rose up, matched up, and played like a top 10 team. Cedric Henry at the end of the game that day. It can happen, and it can happen quickly. When good athletes, young athletes are backed up against the wall and have to compete. I remember early in the 1998 basketball season, Michigan State was in. They were playing Duke in Chicago. That was the year Michigan State ended up going to Izzo's first Final Four. Morris Peterson, redshirt freshman, and Morris Peterson always been just kind of a casual guy with talent, not always in the best shape, but hadn't really wound into form yet to become the Morris Peterson that he would become. But all of a sudden, when they played Duke, Morris Peterson went from something that he used to be to something that it was going to become. And it was Duke's great talent that took him to another level, a level that was always there, but it took it up a level. Now Michigan State's got this young secondary. Jaden Mangum coming along. First play of the game last week against Richmond. And it was just Richmond, mind you, but Michigan State, 2 deep safeties. He comes up, diagnoses the run, flattens the thing out, arrives quickly, and just the quickness he had while changing direction and making a tackle chest to chest, doesn't give up another inch. I was like, whoa, that was a veteran play. He's been feeling his way around last year, got on the field a little bit as a true freshman. Opener against Central Michigan was okay. Malik Spencer, you've been telling me about him for a long time. He looked very good in the first game. He comes down, reads things quickly, gets there. Those two guys have talent, and they are close with one another. They're second-year players, quite possibly NFL players. Now they're facing all of this, and Michigan State has shown more zone concepts this year, and they've been on the same page. Cover 4, cover 2, cover 6, some Tampa 2, a lot of things, and of course all the cover 3 they did last year. And then they'll go some 25-2 deep man under and single safety deep man under, everything, right? Everybody plays a lot of coverages. Michigan State's been seamlessly doing these things against poor passing opponents. Those two. Dylan Tatum, maybe still out of his natural position, but he's over at corner trying to get his thing done. And Charles Brantley, those guys are going to get matched up. A lot of talent there. Now they're seeing the full bore situation. Angelo Gross at the nickel back. He's had his troubles over the years in terms of pass defense, being on the same page. Have not seen any big mistakes from him yet. There's a little error in the flat against Central with Angelo Gross, but he's done a good job playing the run. He's been an interesting person as a blitzer in past situations, and he's been interesting as a pass rusher, maybe not in blitzes, but in pressures, meaning a blitz in football parlance is rushing 5 or more, basically. But if he's rushing and he's a nickel guy, a lot of times it's been part of a 4-man rush, which is the pressure, and Michigan State might drop a defensive end into the coverage, drop Jacoby Windman into coverage, so it's a 4-man pressure with Angelo Gross coming. So it's a different way to use Angelo Gross in pass defense as a pass rusher, and then Malik Spencer coming up and matching up the nickel situation where Gross normally would be, and Armarion Smith, who's technically the first defensive back off the bench, but when Armarion Smith is coming on the field, he's basically replacing Spencer. Spencer goes in and becomes an Angelo Gross guy, and Gross has been a pass rusher, which has been an interesting twist so far. You got some talent in there, some unproven players, but back there with Mangum and Spencer, it kind of has to start with them. Young guys, they've only played 5-6 games in their lives at this level. Time to grow up. Huge test. Those two guys, unfair to expect them to be great on this day, to be Ronaldo Hill and Julian Peterson on this day. But your thoughts about those two possibly being ready for this moment?
I have no doubts that these two young men will be ready to go. Just you can see kids that have another gear, that have another level to get to. And you talked about Mo Pete and playing in those moments that you just rise to the occasion. Well, it's not rising to the occasion. You're just falling back on your training. It's what you always are. You already were. You just haven't had the opportunity to show it. So, like I said, I talked about Spencer when I saw him last spring. I'm like, that kid's a pro. And Mangum has shown some suddenness lately that, it's like the game, the proverbial game slowing down for him. And you can see that. I like Tatum. I think he plays with some aggressiveness. He's physical over there. He sets the edge, keeps the cup, as a corner. He'll come up and put his face in the fan and get you on the ground. So I like the back four. I think Washington will be surprised if they're watching film from last year's game. I feel better about this back four and our approach to defending Washington this year than I did last year. And even with that, I think you're still going to make plays. That's a well-oiled machine. For our guys is put that bad play behind you. We won't lose a game because of an 18-yard completion. So get him on the ground, get in the huddle, and make him do it again. So I'm not worried about whether these kids are good enough or just it's what's going to happen in adversity. And I put it dealt with this week. A couple of bad plays in the game won't be something that'll that they'll tuck their tails and head home from. So I'm not worried about that in the least bit. Just some little nuggets of that I think I'm sure these things have been drilled into our kids all week. But one of the odd things about playing Michael Penix is that he's a lefty. So even though it may seem like it's the same, but it's not, because in comfort quarterbacks will always leak out to their strong hand. And if you're used to being the right defensive right side DN, that means you're always chasing the guy. So you can go a little bit flatter. When you're playing against a lefty, he's going to leak out towards you. So just little things like that. Usually you're the backside corner. Now your strong side, his strong hand. So things like that you just got to get ready for. That you probably wouldn't see. You won't see any other time this year because you're playing against a lefty. And I honestly think that, being a lefty myself, it works in our advantage when you're playing against folks because you're just not ready for it.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because I talked to a former player a couple days ago, and he said watching Penix, if you can get him to move to his right as a left-hander, if you can, then his proficiency drops off a little bit. I don't know if you've noticed that or not. As far as Penix, what's worked against him that you've seen? I know that they had trouble. I got to go back. We'll be writing the pre-snap read tonight for tomorrow at SpartanMAG.com, and I'll look more closely into last year and look more closely into their film so far this year. But the teams maybe that had success with him last year, or if you can pressure him, and easier said than done, make him move to his right. Have you seen anything like that has had any success against, in my opinion, the best passing quarterback in the country and the number one rated pass offense in the country?
The biggest thing with Washington is their precision and their timing. So anything you can do to throw off the timing, that's what I said on those short drops, those quick 3-step. And sometimes they're not even 3 steps. He's in the gun, and that thing's hitting his hand, and it's coming out. So, really, you just got to get your hands up. I mean, we have, Sami, I think he's 6'7".
Yeah.
So,
got some
get
size.
your hands up.
Zion Young has size.
Yeah. Get your hands up and try to just, make those passing lanes difficult. 'Cause I don't think you're going to be. I mean, the ball comes out so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Good luck getting unless it's just a quick whiff on the offensive lineman where the time on a 3-step drop, man, you're not going to get there in time to get a sack, and make them have to double clutch and things like that, and your corners and DBs time close. So on those 3 steps, get your hands up. We talked about interior pressure, and then sometimes then take your chance on a few zone fires. You talked about that earlier, some zone fires where maybe we spring the guy loose where the offensive line, because there is going to be crowd noise, so they're going to have to communicate their pass pro with crowd noise. So pre-snap, we show them a different look. A blitzer's coming from a place they weren't expecting, and you pop one loose. We don't have to win every snap. We just got to win our share. And if we can get them to put 1 or 2 on the ground, or throw 1 or 2 to us, those are extra possessions for our offense. And Penix over on the other side with on the other sideline with the baseball cap on, he can't beat us from there.
Mm-hmm. In terms of fever pitch, I can think of another time in 1998 when Michigan State had went out to Oregon and gotten blown out. Amp Campbell suffered that broken neck injury. Coming back in, he was at middle of the field for the captain's coin flip the next week. Notre Dame came in a big favorite. Michigan State looked like the wheels were falling off. Notre Dame was pretty good. Michigan State just, in a fever pitch situation, blew Notre Dame out, surprised everybody. 48-14, I think, was the score, something like that. But blocked punt was part of that. Michigan State's going to need some of that fever pitch to pour over on special teams. Now, Michigan State last week gave up a fake punt for a first down, something you didn't used to see. You never saw. I don't think a team ever attempted to fake a punt during the entire 13 years of the Mark D'Antonio era. Mike Tressel oversaw special teams back then, and to him, the big thing was get the ball back. Don't jump offside. If it's 4th and 4, don't rough the punter. Don't give up a fake. And Michigan State didn't have much in terms of a punt return game. You never saw Michigan State. You rarely saw Michigan State have a big play on a punt return. I mean, Keyshawn had a few. It would happen here and there. But they would not set up for a return to block. A lot of times they were in punt safe. So no one ever attempted to fake a punt. Michigan State last week, they were going for a block on that one. They had 5 guys on the left side of the line of scrimmage, including Christian Fitzpatrick, Jalen Franklin, guys with a lot of length. Jaron Glover, very good athlete. They were going for a block. That's one thing. If a team's going for a block, it leaves you susceptible to a punt fake. Michigan State's got more punt blocks in now than they ever did in the D'Antonio era. D'Antonio's back in the building now. Harlan Barnett philosophies could change a little bit there. 1998 Saban era, punt block was a big part of it. I think Sean Banks was involved. Touchdown, I think. I'm going to be interested to see if you see more punt safe now, or do they stick with what the Mel Tucker, Ross Ells idea was, to be aggressive with some punt blocks here and there. Just a very subtle thing that might be an interesting telltale to some war room changes behind the scenes. Your thoughts?
I think you pick your spots. I mean, you have in pregame, you have your spotter out there with the stopwatch. You see how long it takes the guy to get the punt off. If he's slow, make note of that. And then, there's some times where you're like, okay, this is where we want to go get it. A roll of dice, you're going to take a shot. I thought, down the distance where they were on maybe a fake punt, I don't think you worry about. And let me back up. It's rare to see a punt block called at midfield. I mean, most at midfield they're going to be in safe. And so that's right off the bat. Field position was a little bit different for to call a punt block. If you're backed up at minus 10,
right?
Nobody's running a fake, so you can call a punt block or not with the fakes. I think field position was just as responsible for that as they just guessed right. But I think we have a good return game, and it would be. I think it would. I wouldn't like to see us just go back to fair catching and getting the football back when you got a guy that can split the field, and and anytime you can go on a short field, the percentages go up, that you're going to get points. So any way we can manufacture offense, I think that's the approach I'd like to see us take. I don't want to see us. Tyrell Henry looks like he has an opportunity to break one every time he gets his hands on the ball. So just to surrender that with fair, going punt safe and fair catch, and I don't think that's I don't think we're built that way. Right now at least our offense isn't mature, hasn't developed enough that we can just, hey, let's get the ball back and we'll do it with our offense. I think we need to attack, in all three phases. So, but you got to be smart with when you call those pump fakes. But as far as punt returns, yeah, I think our return game, I don't see any reason why we need to go back to just fair catching the ball and getting the ball back. I think that's waving the white flag on special teams, and you're not making them have to guard you the same way you have to guard them.
Did you catch Harlan Barnett's press conference on Tuesday when he was asked about D'Antonio being involved, and Barnett kind of said, yeah, Coach D asked, hey, did you think about doing this? And I said, yeah, I thought about doing this. And Barnett's like, I can't share with you what those things are. I suspect they're talking about X's and O's, maybe I don't think it would be, practice organization or anything like that. But, I mean, how deep could the changes run on defense with this? It's still Scotty Hazelton's defense. Barnett and D'Antonio are not big ego guys that are going to come in like a bull in the china shop and think they can take over. Hey, neither is Hazelton. And like Barnett said, he said, when we don't have egos in our coaching staff, and when Mark D'Antonio has something to say, people are eager to learn. I do think the personality mix is pretty good on the defensive side of the ball. I think there's respect from Jim Salgado with D'Antonio all the way around. I do think D'Antonio is going to bring in a set of eyes. I don't think he's going to be up there changing things, but it's like an analyst that's in the room, a little bit more than just an analyst. It's an in-game live analyst that can help more as the season goes along. But your thoughts, did you catch that when Barnett said, we talked about, he was talking about, did you think about this? And I was thinking, did you think about this? So there's already some tweaks that might be subtle, but did you pick up on that? And am I reading that wrong?
I did. I did pick up on that. And it was kind of funny because the first thing I thought of is, how much can you really change in a couple of days? So my guess is the changes you're going to see will be small, and we probably go completely unnoticed, to the casual fan. Just because you don't want to come in and bombard kids with too many different changes. But there's some small adjustments, philosophical adjustments to the particular formations or situationally. Absolutely, you'll see those change. I mean, that's just coaches always have a different way of there's no coaching staff that's going to be 100% the same eyesight on things. You don't want that. You don't want to have tunnel vision. You want to have guys that have different, viewpoints and things like that. So it's natural. It's only natural that when Harlan has, coach, has this chance to be the head guy, there's certain things that, he may have had a different opinion about or wanted to take a different approach. And I don't know if you have time to implement all those things, but I don't know how large that list is. But I would think situationally there might be things or approaches that, Harlan may have wanted to do something differently or had a different philosophical view on that you will see some of that on Saturday. Again, to the degree, I don't think it'll be a whole lot. I mean, I don't know if there's enough time to go and, put in wholesale changes, but it might be something as simple as this. You practice a bunch of different looks, and game day, you might not call those looks that the defensive backs coach or the defensive coordinator, whomever. It might be as simple as Harlan and Hazelton wanted to play it a certain way, and Tuck would overrule that. Now they're capable of playing it that way. So it doesn't necessarily have to be changes that Harlan and D'Antonio will implement. It could be changes that the entire coaching staff wanted, and got over, and was overruled by the previous head man. So, but again, I don't think you go into this game and try to tweak too many things just because this isn't the opponent you want to go in and throw out a bunch of new stuff that you really haven't had time to practice. So, but I do expect there's going to be some special situational stuff that, they've been waiting to use that they're now free to use.
Mm-hmm. I when you talked about rushing 3 and dropping 8, that was kind of an interesting thing we've seen Michigan State do a little bit of, but not much. But in this situation against this guy that gets rid of it so quickly, when D'Antonio in the past and Barnett and Narduzzi, when they've gone against quarterbacks who do get rid of it so quickly, they've been a little less inclined to blitz as much. Narduzzi used to blitz a lot, and he's blitzing more than anybody at Pittsburgh right now. But going all the way back again, 2000, D'Antonio was defensive backs coach, and he was a big part of the plan in 2000 to beat Drew Brees. Purdue, when he came to town as the Heisman Trophy front runner, Michigan State with Bobby Williams as head coach, upset Purdue, and D'Antonio had a lot to do as defensive backs coach. And Brad Lawing was involved as well, and of course Bill Miller with hey, this guy gets rid of the ball so quick, forget about even rushing him. Let's drop 8, stay sound, and hit. And they pulled a huge upset that day. A Michigan State team that went 5-6 didn't go to a bowl game. But that's D'Antonio, and he's in the room. Barnett wasn't there at that time, but that's a concept that's going to be talked about for the reasons you mentioned, how quickly they get it out. And they've got a quick game in terms of coming to the line of scrimmage, and then a quick shift, and then the ball is snapped, and they are on you, and someone's open, and the ball's coming out accurately with velocity to NFL receivers right now. And it's like, hey, good luck keeping this to 8 yards or less. So the pass rush there, not a factor with those type of plays. You get into third down situations, maybe you can do some of those things, but D'Antonio dropping 8, there's some history there. And I've got to believe, like you mentioned earlier, that we haven't seen much of that, but we could see it in this weekend. I'm sure other teams have tried that against Washington. That's what some of the SEC teams started to do against Mike Leach with some success here and there, but then he countered back and ended up having some success of his own in other ways. But they've seen it before. I've not seen it on film, how they've done against that, but have you seen them go against a drop 8 coverage much?
Boise did a little bit of it, but not enough that the game was out of hand so much that it didn't matter. I think, but see, here's the thing with that. When you got a light box, are they so married to their pass offense they'll resist the temptation to run against the light box? Because to me, if we lose the game to Washington because they're running the football, then they beat us with their changeup. And you tip your hat to them. But to me, anytime the ball's not in Penix's hands, it's a win for Michigan State. So if you come out with a 3-man front, and they decide they want to run the football, and it becomes a running game, I'm okay with that.
Sure. And go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I think by playing that 3-man, and you mix in some 4-man, but I think you come on that 3-man line. Now, personally, I wouldn't start the game in 3-man line. I'm gonna come out with my base defense and then adjust from there. I don't want to outsmart myself, and they haven't proven that they can move the ball against my base. So I'm gonna come out in base, and then we'll adjust from there. So assuming that it gets to a point where we gotta adjust, and you go to a 3-man line. I'm going 3-man line, 5 across, 3 deep, and seeing if they can be precise in throwing into traffic, and then you make them pay. You don't give anything up over the top. You make them pay when they catch the football, and see if 4 quarters of getting hit. If they're still wanting to run those routes in the 4th quarter. So I think you're going to see some 3-man front. I think we're going to throw the kitchen sink at them. You're going to have to come with some different looks that they even stuff that they prepare for. If you're sound in it, just come up and tackle. They're going to move the ball. We got to win the game, from the 30, from in between the 30s. In between the in red zone. They're moving the ball in between the 30s. Great, you don't get points for that, but when they get to plus 30, I think that's when the game begins.
By the way,
so as long
go ahead.
So as long as we don't give up big plays over the top.
Oh, can't have any of those. By the way, Simeon Barrow, like you said, hasn't been playing as much, 19 snaps last week. Been saving him maybe. Dre Butler, 15 snaps. But those defensive tackles were really, those snap counts were really spread around and conserved. So they come out of 2 games, should be pretty fresh. Armarion Smith is a guy that played 7 snaps last week. He's part of that dime defense back at safety. If Michigan State goes with extra defensive back look, Michigan State's base is a nickel, so an extra DB is a dime. Interesting to see if Armarion Smith, if Michigan State does more of that which could be called for in this game. Rushing 3, dropping 8 against pass attack. Armorian Smith, does he play more than 7 snaps? That could be interesting.
Oh, for sure.
He's looked pretty good. But we're getting into that stage where players need to play like we don't know they can. Maybe he can.
I don't believe that. I think guys just need to see when you start saying stuff like that, confident, when guys start to try to do things that are outside their ability. I don't think we need to play over our heads. I think guys just need to be sound in what we do and live with the results. I don't think we need to go out and expect guys to be do anything superhuman. Just, hey, make the plays that are there to be made and live with the results. When you start trying to do more than you're capable of is when mistakes happen. Mm-hmm. And if we play mistake-free football and they beat us, then that's just what it is. But what you don't want to do is, try to make some hero plays and get out of character. And now you're giving up plays that should have been defended. So, I just wanted.
What I mean by that is someone like Armorian Smith has only played like 12 snaps as a Spartan. He might be out there for 20 snaps in this game. We don't know how he plays. We've seen him look pretty good against these two teams, but someone like him, Dre Butler, could be playing more. What I mean is, I'm not asking, Noah Kim to go out there and become, Drew Brees or Tom Brady and do something they're not capable of. I'm talking about some players who haven't really demonstrated, and we don't really know exactly how good they are and how good they might be. And Armorian Smith is one of them.
I think that's honestly the lion's share of our roster. There's a lot of guys that are playing key roles that we haven't counted on. So it's going to be exciting. And I think there's some young talent on this team that I think they're excited to show that they belong and that they're capable. And, so I think, I'm excited for them. I talked about those young receivers all spring, that I saw, out there in the spring making plays. I'm excited about the young DBs. We have a lot of, a good depth of D-line. I think we're a little thin at linebacker. We could be a little thin at linebacker, but I like our D-line depth. But really, man, like I said, on defense, the 3-tech, important. And man, that offensive line. If we can run the football and control the clock, all bets are off.
And that's one of the ingredients you need to beat Washington is control the ball, run the ball. Washington this year has allowed 153 yards rushing per game. That's against Boise and Tulsa. They're allowing 4.5 yards per carry. A team with a good rushing attack could give them trouble, like maybe Minnesota, who ran the ball well last week. Nathan Carter looks really good. Jalen Berger, I'm not expecting him to play. Jaron Mangum, up in the air. I'm not expecting him to play. I'm expecting Davion Prim to be the number 2 running back, and that's a dicey situation. Nothing against that young man, but it's brand new for him. Nathan Carter's good. Excellent. Is he durable enough to be the type of guy that in this game, if things go exceedingly well and Michigan State is running the ball through the first 2.5 quarters, can he go ahead and give you 20 plus 25 carries and not have an issue? They are questionable in run defense, and Michigan State's offensive line has been a disappointment so far in some ways. I thought Ethan Boyd came off the bench and was excellent at right tackle. I'm expecting him to start again at right tackle this weekend. Duplain had troubles in the first game, just a couple, and he's a proven player. But there was, Duplain and Samac gave up a sack on a stunt play last week. Now, that's pass protection. Pass protection's been good this year, and in previous years, I don't anticipate that being a big problem. Although they've got an excellent first-round draft pick out there at defensive end, Braylon Trice, number 8. We're talking about their offense. They've got an excellent stand-up defensive end. But that offensive line, which was supposed to be a team strength, has not yet become one. I think there's a capacity to improve there. Last week, Michigan State offensive line showed some new things. They ran some plays that didn't look like zone. It was kind of looked like zone, but backside offensive tackle would open up and pass set, almost like it was draw zone or something. I'm not, offensive line aficionados could probably tell me what that is, or maybe it's something brand new. I've not had a chance to talk to Chris Kapilovic about it, but there were some new things mixed in there. I don't shut the door on the possibility that the offensive line could come around and become a plus almost overnight at some point in this season. It needs to be right now. Michigan State has not demonstrated that they've got the type of running game yet that needs to be a big part of the recipe for a path to victory in this game. Would you agree? And any chance for hope there with Michigan State with some injuries at the running back position and just some cloudiness there?
I mean, it's been well documented that, I through the first two games, I don't think we've been physical enough in the run game up front. Some of that might be trying to figure out the right playing combinations in that group. Some of it's just lining up and beating the guy in front of you, and committing to the run game. It's kind of, I said the defensive line, they read offensive linemen and when they're getting off the ball. Well, our offensive linemen do the same. They get into a rhythm of, what this guy is doing with his hands, so they learn how to block guys. So you got to give them time to get lathered up and figure out, what this guy's weaknesses are across from him, and things like that. But my biggest thing is we have to stay in the game long enough for the run game to matter.
Right.
You said Washington gave up 150 yards. Those are blowout wins. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to get behind where so quickly that you got to abandon the run game.
Right.
So I think staying in it, long enough because they're fourth quarter they're traveling 2,000 miles to play this game. So those body blows for 3.5 quarters, how are those legs going to feel in the fourth quarter? Mm-hmm. So we have to stay in the game and keep it from getting out of hand early, so that run game, so our offensive line can start leaning on people. But look, I think they ought to be excited for this challenge as well. We talked about the young secondary. Some young guys are going to have an opportunity to make claims to some jobs. And you talked about Boyd. I thought he was firm in the pass game, and he came out in the run game and got into some people. So there's some young offensive linemen that they have an opportunity to step in and get themselves a starting job. And you put your chance. I'd like to see us just get into these guys and make it an old style Big Ten game. And if we can do that up front, that defense is over there on the sideline resting, and they only got to play 50 snaps instead of 80. Bodes well for us.
I'm going to rewind a little bit. I'm expecting Jordan Simmons to be the number 2 running back. I thought Davion Prim looked pretty good for 3 carries until he fumbled on one. I thought he looked, and then Jordan Simmons had 1 carry, fumbled on that one. But Jordan Simmons had gotten into the game before Jalen Berger in the Central Michigan game. I'm not sure if that was rewarding him for something or something else. But then, Jordan Simmons has been on the field in third down pass protection situations. He's okay there. So I'm going to rewind and say I'm expecting Jordan Simmons to be number 2. And he started in the Peach Bowl at running back. One thing that Jordan Simmons does give us is he's pretty solid in the screen game. Yeah. So, he's not bad in screens. So, and because he's good at, he's been in pass pro, you're not tipping the plays when you bring him in. Mm-hmm. So there's some, he's a guy that led Michigan State in rushing during the COVID year as a true freshman, and then it kind of evaporated from the playing group, was 4th string times last year, stayed around. Now he's got an opportunity, and that's another guy that needs to play like we don't know he can, and we'll see. I mean, I've never really been, I like the kid as a student and all that stuff, and give him credit for hanging around. He's never struck me as a guy whose body has improved every single year. I mean, Nathan Carter had a great body coming in, and now he looks like, Javon Ringer type Adonis type of guy. Maybe Simmons can prove me wrong like Dre Butler has, and he can show some juice. On the other side of the field, Odunze, the wide receiver, is going to be an early first-round draft pick, 6'3", 215, can fly with a smooth stride. Interesting in that Washington, in the game against, I think it was the Tulsa game, where they'll put a wide receiver in the backfield. They do a lot of that. They'll hand it off as just like a tailback. Jeremy Bernard will get some handoffs as a tailback, as a running back. So they shift and they get Odunze. It's first and goal like the 5. They gain 2 yards. Second and goal, they gain another yard. Now it's third down and 1.5 yards. Similar to last year when Michigan State played Washington, Michigan State had a goal line stand. Short yardage run game for Washington is not their strength. So it's third and goal at the 1.5 yard line. Odunze comes in motion. They like to trade tight ends and motion and then snap quick before you're ready or try to get you looking at the wrong thing. I think DeBoer's been quoted as saying it's about plays, not formations. The formations are done to try to get you to look at the wrong thing. We'll talk more about that in a moment. So they shift Odunze into the backfield. Or are they handing it to him? No, he from the backfield stops, and when he motions, he's motioning at a high rate of speed. He's not jogging across formation. He's using that great speed of his to go from one side of the field to the backfield or to the other side. And he goes to the backfield, and it's 3rd and goal, and they just throw a little arrow route out to him. And it was simple, but extremely hard to cover in terms of just being a simple arrow route. Because, wait, he's coming from the backfield. Is that on film? We've not seen this. And before you can react, it's a 3-yard gain touchdown. It's not like they're trying to go 80 yards with it, but keeping that out of the end zone, a usage of his talent, and it is immense talent. It's 6'3", physical, excellent speed, excellent hands, high first-round draft choice. Your thoughts about Odunze?
I mean, I don't know what else. I mean, you covered it. The kid's he's a pro. He's a first-rounder. But I'll tell you what, there's one thing I did notice on film. I did notice this on film, and I don't know. And look, I don't know. I'm sure our coaches have noticed it, and I'm sure other coaches have noticed it. Man, Washington's really, every snap, you probably could call them for a legal shift.
Yeah.
Because they're not set for that second when the ball snapped.
Okay.
I mean, they do it so much that I think they just the refs like it's what they do.
It's a tactic.
But I mean,
that's interesting, and that's a tactic because they want to snap that ball.
If I'm Michigan State sideline, man, I am on that ref like, man, these dudes are not set. They're shifting, but they're not. The quarterback's not holding them. I mean, it is. They're right up on the edge of it being a legal shift every play. It's like our DBs used to hold. And they're physical. If you do it every play, they can't call it 70 times a game. But man, maybe on one of those key 3rd downs, you get a flag because you've been in that guy's ear all game. Like, man, it's illegal. It's illegal. But just want to just put that out there. Take a look. They're right on the edge, man. It's definitely not a full second. It might be a slight beat between when that guy, when they get set and the ball snap, but it's not what it's supposed to be.
The rule book says
they do it so often.
What's the rule book say? 1 second? I've not.
1 second. Yeah, 1 second.
And they're doing it so fast, it's a tactic. They do these shifts and motions and trades because they want to get you off balance and they want that ball snapped before you can ID and communicate.
Absolutely.
That's why that rule's in place. And guess who just joined the coaching staff is Mark D'Antonio. I like to call upon history. I go back to Cotton Bowl, January 1st, 2015, the 2014 season. Maybe that was December 31st. Anyway, 2014 season when Michigan State was playing Baylor. Baylor was doing RPO. They invented RPO, Art Briles and all those crooks down there. And one of the things that they did with the RPO, it's a run and it's a pass. Everybody knows that now. So it's run blocking with a passing game. So run blocking, if the offensive linemen are getting downfield, that's a legal man downfield. And Baylor had done it and done it and done it, and they'd stretch it to 2 yards. The rule in the NFL is 1 yard. In college, I think it's 2.5, 3 yards. They would stretch it to 4 to 5 yards. Michigan State worked the officials as soon as the officials got on the field for pregame. Working them. And early in that game, Baylor was called at least 2 times for illegal man downfield. Now, Baylor still had a field day throwing to the slot receivers. Michigan State played zone and gave up that pass. I think 17 or 18 completions were to that slot receiver on little out routes, and Michigan State allowed that and tried to stiffen up in the red zone. And they did cause Baylor to attempt more field goals than Baylor attempted in any game all year. So Michigan State took that as a win, but Baylor got the lead on a couple of trick plays, so give them credit to that in that particular game. That whole game was an interesting study. That's why I remember it. But Michigan State was willing to give up those underneath routes, try to get the ball out, stiffen up in the red zone, cause field goals. Mark D'Antonio, when he talks to Barnett, that, it's a different style of offense, but the same philosophy could come up. Give up the short stuff, hit hard. Maybe we'll get a turnover, stiffen in the red zone, force field goals. But part of that also is working those officials from the time they come out of the tunnel. From the time they come out of the tunnel.
Time that you just, hey man, it's illegal. You can't have that. I mean, they flip the formation, and especially when you're going from a tight bunch to they're in a tight bunch, and then they'll expand, and man, the ball snapped. I'm like, that's illegal. Or the tight ends, or they'll have a tight end with his hand, in the ground, and he'll shift the other side of the formation. And as soon as his hand touches the ground, they're snapping the ball. Illegal.
And think about this. A lot of these officials, I don't know if they'll be Big Ten officials, probably be Pac-12 officials. Probably. So good luck with that. I was about to say, D'Antonio's going to be on the field at pregame first time ever, or first time in 4 years. So the interesting concept there is, officials will be like, "Hey, Mark, haven't seen you in 4 years," and you'd chum it up and everything.
Sure.
And that's when Mark would say, "Hey, great to see you again. By the way, keep an eye on this." However, this set of officials might not be guys that he's been familiar with, so that part of it might not be there. And historically, we've seen. I don't know. It seems like I don't know. I'm not going to comment on officiating in conferences and things like that. But anyway, Odunze is amazing. Michigan State's that's great. I had not noticed that about how quickly they snap the ball. That's great observation and insight from Ron. Big movie. Armstrong here at SpartanMAG Live. Hey, we had somebody that gave us a little tip jar here. So and he has a question with it. So I've got to talk about this. It's a little bit of an intangible thing, and Ron might not want to comment about it, but it's something that fans talk about. But it's SF, and appreciate his donation in the tip jar. It helps. And at SpartanMAG.com, we've got a number of young writers on a part-time basis, and it helps us with our budget. When you subscribe to SpartanMAG.com, the actual website over there, so we'd love to have all you guys that are watching that are not subscribers get over there. We'll be covering that and the coaching situation throughout the season and what Michigan State's going to do for their next permanent head coach. Could be Harlan Barnett if they win X number of games this year. We'll get to that question later. But anyway, the question is a little off topic, but can we agree to retire the quote-unquote woodshed and get back to the business at Spartan Stadium, I think he says. Now, I'll go first on this. I mean, the woodshed, that goes back to the Saban era. Pat Rule came up with that line. He was offensive line coach at the time. And that was a time when woodshed was part of college football vernacular. Chris Fowler and Herb Street at the beginning of College Football Live and Game Day. When you blew somebody out, you took them behind the woodshed. That's what people called it back then. You don't hear that as much anymore, but that's what it meant. Pat Rule was like, "Hey, man, when you come here, we're going to take you behind the woodshed or take you to the woodshed." That was the idea. And then it disappeared when Bobby Williams and Pat Rule and those guys moved on. Mel Tucker was graduate assistant in 1998, 1999 during that time, so he remembered that. So when he came back, he rechristened the stadium that way with some branding and so forth. There's a sign up there, "Welcome to the Woodshed." I'll be curious to see if that's up there. That's one man's opinion. A fan, he says, "Can we all agree?" I doubt that we're all going to agree on that, but it wasn't necessarily a Mel Tucker thing. It's something that was around a little bit in the Saban era. So I don't have a strong opinion on it, but it's an interesting question that he posed. Other people can comment about it over in the comments area. Ron, I don't know if you've got an opinion on that or not. I know you're more of a between the lines type of guy, but your thoughts on that?
I don't have an opinion. I mean,
Right. I got you. That's enough.
Games played. Games played on the field. I mean, if I don't have an opinion on that. Spartan Stadium, Woodshed, whatever. We win the game. We all get ice cream.
All right. Little league bribery going on. That's fine.
Right.
Okay. The motions last year, the way Washington did their shifts and their motions, I felt like that Michigan State. I don't know if Washington had shown that a lot on film up to that point, but Michigan State looked to me like a defense that wasn't prepared for that, and it looked like Washington achieved pre-snap advantages over and over again last year. You went back and rewatched that game. Would you agree with that? What are your thoughts on the pre-snap?
Yeah, here's what it looked like to me. It looked like pre-snap. They were looking for matchups. They knew how we would adjust. So I don't think they were. I think they were moving. They were shifting to get the isolate guys up that they wanted to win. They felt like if they could get their interior receivers, I think if I'm not mistaken, I think they inverted their receivers a couple of times, knowing that they would switch release and they would end up being outside receivers.
Sure.
But
yeah, they got Kimbrough. They got Kimbrough on that one time.
They would have corners instead of corners guarding their best receivers. They had slot guys guarding their best receivers.
Sure.
So I think that was them wanting to isolate certain matchups. And then taking advantage of those matchups, because I can't recall any time where they did where they shifted and they switched release and they didn't go to the guy that they were shifting to move to that position. So that's why I thought we'd see more big zone this year, because it kind of eliminates a lot of those shifts. If you're zoning it, they can move around all they want. We're not gonna move, or you can show movement but then zone it when it looks like you're moving with them and maybe catch them in some catch them off guard a little bit. But More often than not, those shifts were to isolate personnel, specific matchups that they wanted to attack.
And they did that with, by the way, Tim Main. Thanks to Tim Main for something in the tip jar here. It's kind of like the Riv all of a sudden, Ron. You remember those days? But Riv is still standing, by the way, and appreciate all the people that work there. But it's still hard to get a drink there. Not that I'm there very often. Maybe about once every 2 years when some of the old timers come in. But anyway, appreciate Tim Main supporting the cause a little bit. We certainly do. Now, in terms of Michigan State, if Michigan State does try to get more receivers deep, or more defenders deep, drop 3, drop 8 type of thing, rush 3, drop 8, or just zone in general, all that gets back to, like you said earlier, if Washington sees a lighter box and they're enticed to try to run the ball. And like I said, Washington in a short yardage is not real good running the ball. But I've not gone through the entire Boise State game or the entire Tulsa game. But when they've handed it off against a light box, they're gaining 7 and 8 from what I've seen. I know their stats don't line up that way, but I'm like, man, that doesn't look like a weak running attack to me. But if you're Michigan State to win this game, 2 safeties deep, some zone, more zone like they've shown this year, changing the zone, changing the hieroglyphics back there so they don't know for sure what kind of zone it is at pre-snap, trying to on occasion. That works a lot better if you can stop the run with the standard number. If you can have somebody defeat a block and get off if you're 2-gapping, and if Michigan State has the defensive front that we've talked about most of the year, how sturdy and strong they are, if they can do the job. Now, the safeties are going to arrive and help once the ball's handed off, but it's not like you're going to get up there and get an 8-man front or an extra man front. Now, if you're 1-gapping, you've got to have somebody, you've got to commit someone up there a little bit sooner. But if you're 2-gapping, Zion Young, Simeon Barrow, Bogle, Derek Harmon, can these guys on a regular basis defeat a man and a half that gets you the equivalent of playing with 12 men on the field, kind of? Stopping the run with a standard number. If you're going to be light in the box, be light in the box numbers-wise, but individually strong enough, like Georgia in their heyday, we're going to play 2 safeties deep and kick your butt in the trenches at the same time. You can't run the ball, and we're not even going to commit safeties to it. Can Michigan State do that against everybody? No. Can they do it against Washington? It's one of those things Michigan State needs to happen for the path to victory. Your thoughts, Simeon Barrow, Zion Young, and those guys, and what you see in the Washington offensive line.
Okay, look, real quickly. I mean, you can be light in the box, but but be big enough up front that you're not light with size.
Yeah, not light with size. Light with numbers. Light with numbers.
Right. So I think we have some big D linemen that we can occupy bodies in there and make it tough for them. But I'll sum it up really quickly for you. What's Washington's starting running back's name?
I don't know. Their best running back was hurt during preseason camp. I've got it in
What's his name?
I don't. Let's see.
My point is, we know the receivers' names. Mm-hmm. We know the quarterback.
Cam Davis. I've got it in my notes. Cam Davis was the guy that was injured, and the other running back is Nixon. Nixon is the other one.
Okay, so my point is, you're 5 guys deep, and you got to go 5 different guys in the scouting report before you get to a running back, or you got to go 4 before you get to a running back as a threat. I'm not saying those guys aren't capable. They're on D1 scholarships, but my point is, if you're Washington, that's not your game plan. Your game plan is we're going to run the football and we're going to beat Michigan State that way. That's not the game plan. So if that's how they ultimately win the game, it's because they didn't have a choice. It was, hey, we got to run the football because these pass windows aren't. Yeah, make them have to make a decision on running into a light box or throwing into traffic. I think that's what you have to do. And I think with some of those D linemen we brought in, there's some big guys up front. And I think if I'm not mistaken, Washington is replacing their 3 interior linemen. Those guys are first year starters or didn't play a lot of snaps last year. So we're not playing against guys with a ton of snaps on their belt as well. So I think we can win up front on that D line. I think we can win up front.
What about Michigan State before we let you go, your thoughts on any observations against Richmond from last weekend, if you were handing out helmet stickers or things that areas that you see that are showing progress?
I liked our young offensive linemen. I thought we looked a bit more physical when the young guys were in there. Secondary continues to just get better, man. They're physical and their tackling is physical. Now, I will give them a slight minus because they've gotten their hands on the ball, but haven't been able to reel those interceptions in. So if they hit, we can't have that this weekend. Mm-hmm. But I like the DBs, man. They're coming around. They're physical. They tackle well in space. They seem to communicate that they seem sure of the concepts and what we're trying to get done. You don't see a ton of guys looking to the sideline in confusion. But that's a defense in its entirety. I think overall our defense looks much more sure of what we're trying to get done out there. So I do like that defense, like the defense as a unit. Hey, we got a kicker. So there's been a lot of positives. I think the one drawback is just sustaining drives. I'd like to see us be able to do that. I'd like to see us be able to run the ball in our terms. Those are things. But as far as individual helmet stickers, I think right now it's been groups that I've been impressed with. I've been impressed with the wide receiver group, defensive line. I think that defensive unit is coming around. Quarterback play. It's tough to take issue with anything Noah Kim's done at this point. He probably starts the game a little juiced up, and so some of them throw sail on him, but he settles in and he's been accurate. But really for me, it's just I think offensive line is in that run blocking. We get that sorted out by Saturday. I think the arrow starts to point up pretty quickly for us. It might be things that we do well in this game and still lose, but you can come out of the thing, we might be okay moving forward. So I don't necessarily want to look at the results in this game as going to determine it for how our season is going to go. I'm going to look at how we play and how those groups, continue to get better.
All right. I was looking at some of the players. I was going to put together like a hot 11 like I used to do after a game. Yeah, I'd probably put Nathan Carter in there over 100 yards rushing. He had a 19-yard carry midway through the game where he should have been stopped in the backfield, and he eluded the guy. I think so. There was that one, and he finished in short yardage. So I kind of had him number one. Now on that 19-yarder, it was Spencer Brown that was beaten inside on that. So the offensive tackles, Michigan State's splits seemed wider than usual. I don't know if that was just to get them to stretch out their guys further. I'm sure it was on purpose, but he was wide, but then he got beaten inside, didn't get it closed off, and Carter should have been stopped for a 4-yard loss, made that guy miss. Trey Mosley, a very good blocker, missed his block. Carter made another guy miss. 19 yards was the big-time run by Nathan Carter on that one. Over 100 yards rushing, touchdown. So I put him number one. Trey Mosley, despite missing that block, I thought was really good. There was one time when they hit, when Mosley was involved. Let me see if I can see exactly who it was. It was 27-yard pass to Glover on a deep dig. It was, just old-fashioned dagger concept. One guy going deep, take the top off the defense, and then a deep in cut behind it, a deep, a deep dig, if you will, 27 yards. And it was Mosley that ran deep and took the top off, and that was something I was curious about. Mosley, whether he could do that. He's been a possessions receiver for so long, but in that play, in that concept, they used him as the deep threat to push the safeties back and then run an in cut behind it. And that was for 27 yards to Glover, so I thought that was pretty good. But Trey Mosley, I give him credit on that play, even though he wasn't the guy that caught it. But Glover making that catch, and the other one where Glover was hit on that one across the middle and held onto the ball, that was a big-time catch. Guts, and he came off the field, took a hard shot on that one. That one was, Matt Millen, nothing against him and what he did with the Lions and everything, but gosh, he doesn't offer a whole lot of insight. He tries to, but for a football guy, I'm like, man, is he missing some concepts here? Maybe if he had a chance to rewind it and watch it again, he might be better, because there's no question he knows more than football about me, no question. But as I'm rewinding, I'm like, man, he didn't see this, he didn't see that. And I did agree with him. He made the point that Noah Kim in the NFL, that throw that he threw to Glover when he got lit up, is one that maybe you shouldn't throw. But in that one, the other team, who was it? Who the hell did they play? Richmond, sorry. Richmond was in 3 deep, middle of the field was closed. And throwing an in-cut when the middle of the field's closed, you're asking for a big hit there. Problem with that is Michigan State, Ron, we talked about this earlier in the week. We don't need to comment further on it necessarily, but Michigan State had symmetrical route concepts on either side of the field. They had the outside receiver ran an in-cut and the inside receiver kind of did an out and up or did an out. So he had the exact same thing on both the left and the right, and neither one of them was good for middle field open in terms of throwing it to the guys on the in-cut. Maybe along the sidelines, it was kind of well covered. The sidelines, they were kind of curls. They were kind of probably option routes. I don't know, but one of them was covered. The other one was a little bit open over on the right sideline. But would he have had time to read all of that, read all 4 of them? I don't know. He might have been coached against tucking and running too early because he did that a couple of times on other occasions. But if you're throwing that in cut to either side, middle field closed, the receiver's going to get hit either way. So I didn't really was going to get hit either way from what I could see. I don't necessarily blame Kim for making that throw and leading him into a hit because that's all he had. That's my amateur view on things. I didn't get a chance to ask Noah Kim about it after the game because I hadn't seen that. And then this week during interviews, there were no player interviews because of the obvious circumstances. But anyway, on one hand, maybe the throw shouldn't get thrown, but I'm not necessarily blaming Noah Kim on that one. But Glover making a big-time catch there, taking a hit.
Absolutely.
Now, Glover, 2 games in a row, I know when they signed him, they loved him. I was wrong about that. I looked at his high school film. I'm like, whatever. I don't know. Maybe he was going against NFL guys on his high school film. I'm not sure. But speed, hands, toughness, the whole thing. That was one guy coming into the season that I did not have on my list as being an impact guy, and he has been an impact guy. I've got him as like the number 5 star on my Hot 11. Got Zion Young in there also. Brandon Wright. I don't know if you saw my post over the Underground Bunker message board today. That guy's got 1 sack this year. Almost had another, but Michigan State was called for defensive holding on Chuck Brantley on that play. Got to the quarterback first. Would have at least had an assist. But just his takeoff, and you're seeing him long arm guys with some strength. You're seeing shoulder dip and change of direction. You're seeing that ankle flex, hip flex. And then, the running back, when he gets into the backfield and he's chasing down a quarterback, then you see his old running back footwork getting through the wash a little bit. He only has 1 sack at this point, but he looks to me like a plus pass rusher. I think he's the best pass rusher on the team right now. And Brandon Wright, a guy that we said don't forget about this guy because he missed the last 4 games of the season last year. Brandon Wright, when they moved him to running back to defensive end, it was a project and a long-term project. I'm calling him a plus pass rusher right now. Have you noticed Brandon Wright as a pass rusher?
Absolutely. You're starting to see him put it together. He's starting to look like a pass rusher, not an athlete just running around, running the hoop, running too far upfield. He was one in particular when he got upfield and he retraced his steps and kind of got into the offensive lineman with a little hip toss and was able to come underneath for the sack. That's putting together. And you say, yeah, it's against Richmond. He couldn't have done that last year. Mm-hmm. So you're starting to see, and like I said, he's firm enough in the run game that you can have him out there. But his ability to turn the corner and bend, I think he's just scratching the surface. I think this is a game where Brandon Wright can make some noise just because of his quickness off the ball, off the edge.
And the things he's doing on grass. Pass rushers a lot of times don't like grass. He's making artificial turf pass rushes on grass. I don't know if that makes sense. The third play of the game.
Yeah, getting low, turning that corner, getting low, getting his hips turned. Yeah,
body lean.
Yeah.
That ankle flexibility. Third play of the game. He fakes an inside rush and then accelerates to an outside rush off a single plant foot. He doesn't need to take 2 steps to change direction. That's some of that running back talent also. Inside and 1 plant foot and then back to the outside. And the offensive tackle has to dive to catch up to him. And he got to him, but I think Barrow got at least a half sack. And Wright got the initial hit, but I don't know if Brandon Wright got credit for that sack or not. But the change of direction there, some of the internal components in there, I'm like, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Now he's showing some strength. And he's, like you said, putting it together. Brandon Wright is an asset in that pass rush game. Zion Young, the sack that he had, he dominated the right tackle on this play. It was like a sprint out, run and shoot type of play, and he just pushes the left tackle back during the sprint out, disengages and makes a sack. Zion Young looking pretty good on that play. And the Zion Young height could come into a factor in this one with some of those quick game throws as well. But those are some of the guys I've got in the Hot 11. I got Nathan Carr, Trey Mosley, Brandon Wright, Zion Young, Jaron Glover. I got Malik Spencer in there, Noah Kim, Jaden Mangum at safety, Dylan Tatum even. Tatum, Tatum's been hitting pretty good. There was one time when Tatum was in press. I think Tatum is playing well in zone. I think he's got a good feel for zone, when to come off, when to come up, and he takes receipts out there and hits some people pretty good. And he's still scratching the surface. Quick feet, good physicality. Maybe not a true corner. Maybe eventually a nickel. But he's playing corner because he's their best guy there, and he's doing all right. He will get tested this weekend. But there was one play where they're in press coverage, and Richmond throws, just like a 15, 16-yard fade down the sideline. Guy makes a real great catch, gets his feet down. They end up getting flagged for illegal chop block. But he's still getting graded on this, Dylan Tatum did. I thought Dylan Tatum, knowing the way Harlan Barnett coaches things, he's going to think that his hips weren't quite open enough as he did the offhand jam. He was a little bit parallel to him and on his heels a little bit. And it just so happened pre-snap read that their quarterback was going to throw that fade route against press on that one. And I think Dylan Tatum will probably get graded negatively on that one, back to the drawing board, back to the field to work on that. Better it happened to them than against a Dunze. But did you notice that play when he gave up that little sideline route and maybe his feet and hips weren't quite in sync for a guy that does have feet and hips?
Yeah, actually looked like he just wasn't ready to snap the ball.
Okay.
It just looked like he wasn't ready. He wasn't lined up ready to go.
I got Malik Carr in my Hot 11. And I know he didn't block all that great early in the game, but then Tyneil Hopper comes in. I suspect on the sideline at one point, Malik Carr maybe wasn't blocking as well as they think he could have. And Tyneil Hopper got in there, and Tyneil Hopper caught that touchdown. That's Malik Carr's play. Tyneil Hopper catches the touchdown. Hopper, I've said all along, has nice hands. For a guy that's maybe 6'2.5", he had one play against Boise State last year down the seam where I'm like, man, that's a nice catch. That's like a Chris Baker catch. The guy's got hands. Saw him in practice do it a couple of times. Not the biggest guy, though. You bring him in to be a blocker, and he's not the best blocker. He's blocked okay thus far. Got on the field, did okay. Jalen Franklin blocked really well at tight end. But after that play to Tyneil Hopper, very next play of the game, Carr's out there, and they run a play for Malik Carr. In other words, we just benched you for a couple of plays. Now we're going back to you to start this drive, P and 10, as D'Antonio used to say, first play of the drive, and you are the primary. And for Malik Carr, they ran like a shallow crossing route and go, as opposed to like a slant and go sluggo. It was shallow crosser and go, which was a play that they beat Wisconsin with in overtime back at Camp Randall in the D'Antonio era. But shallow cross and go to the tight end, which, defenses, when you get into the middle of a game, the guys that have tight end coverage responsibilities, they might forget, oh, this tight end's dangerous. Maybe they don't forget. Maybe you get a little winded. It was the first play of the drive, so you're not winded or whatever. But shallow crossing route, and it was kind of slow trot and then upfield. And they still covered it pretty well, but a nice 22-yarder. And maybe it was more than that. Maybe it was maybe 25 yards or so. But Malik Carr made that catch, and it was a difficult catch. Came back and had a 22-yard touchdown catch that was waved off because of holding by Spencer Brown. But that was a difficult catch, even though it doesn't go in the stat sheet, and he doesn't go to touchdown to the stat sheet. In the grade sheet at the football building, that's a big plus. So I'm putting Malik Carr in there. I'm putting him in my Hot 11. He's coming around. He's getting some tough love, but he's still a bad man, and they need him.
Absolutely. I actually read that play to Hopper a little bit differently.
Okay.
I read that as, if you see that on film, now you can't assume it's a run play.
Sure.
With Hopper in there.
So they were.
I didn't see that.
Okay.
I didn't see that as we're benching you. We're like, that is, this guy's in. It's not an automatic run play.
All right. That too, and he has hands.
Mm-hmm.
Jalen Franklin.
So now, if you're a linebacker, you want to come screaming downfield because you think 23's in it's power. He's going to run right past you.
And he could catch it. And Jalen Franklin is the guy going back to the spring scrimmage. I thought he was Michigan State's best blocker on that day. And coming from Wisconsin, he's been drilled on it. Didn't get a lot of time at Wisconsin, but he's a functional blocker. And I thought that was a good get out of the transfer portal, bringing a Michigander back home. Also, probably maybe not a scholarship guy. Maybe with the in-state and NIL, maybe they got some things taken care of. I don't know. But anyway, he had a great block, maybe the best block by a tight end in a couple of years. on Nathan Carter's 44-yard touchdown run. You know, it's a zone block, so it's combo block with Brandon Baldwin. They get the defensive end taken care of, and they've got him controlled enough that then he can climb out to the linebacker. So he combo blocks that guy and then gets a linebacker and kicks him out. So it's like inside zone combo and then kick out. You know, a veteran, athletic, solid combo block, and that was the gap that Carter shot through and went down the sideline. That was a big-time block, so credit to Jalen Franklin on that one. I don't have him in my Hot 11, but tight end blocking was pretty good in this game. Against the one thing about these two opponents, Central Michigan and – are you still there? Oh, Movie's got to go. Movie's got to go. All right. So he just told me, he just texted me and said he's got to run, which is great. But two things about Central Michigan and Richmond is they were not good teams, but the one thing that they did reasonably well is they were pretty solid in terms of their defensive fronts and run defense. And Michigan State's run blocking has not been good enough. I mean, you've had 100-yard rushers in 2 straight weeks. That's nice. But some short yardage problems arose, and there were some negative plays in the run game in this game. So they were playing an opponent that was good enough that if you were weak there, they were going to not be a pushover there. That was good for Michigan State in terms of seeing some warts in their own game and showing, if you're a coach, this is not good enough against these two teams. And the opponents are going to get a lot better. And if we keep blocking like this, instead of having a 100-yard rusher, we're not going to have a 50-yard rusher. So in that regard, those two opponents were constructive. Let's finally, we had some people that were kind enough to post over at the Underground Bunker message board some questions, and I appreciate Ron coming on the show. And he says his battery was going out, so he's gone. And we certainly appreciate his contributions. Remember, give us a like over here, subscribe to the channel, and become a SpartanMAG.com subscriber over at SpartanMAG.com. Become a member over there. We'd love to have you get a SpartanMAG.com membership. Become a member. That's a subscription. That's what a subscription is. And we'll be following that Michigan State football team into basketball throughout the entire course of the season. It's going to be an interesting season. I had my list of questions here, and I've got to find it. It's a lot of the usual questions, some pertaining to the Mel Tucker situation and whether Harlan Barnett's the guy long term. Some of those questions came up. I'm finding them right now. Here we go. All right, question number 1. And I'm reading some of these for the first time. I've read them once, but I don't have them condensed, so I might read the long version anyway. And by the way, this Spartan Mag Live, as you've seen over the years, we don't do commercials. Sometimes my voice goes haywire. Could be happening again. So we'll be doing our best on that. All right. TN Spartan from Brentwood, Tennessee says, I know we all live in a Spartan bubble sometimes, but it feels like the Tucker situation has completely consumed all of us. Enough, he says. Can we talk about some football? Can this be a perfect storm for Michigan State to come out with a chip on their shoulders and make this a close game? Good question. We just went through that. If you're joining us late, go back and watch it later, and you'll get to Ron Armstrong's breakdown of everything about this game and some input from myself also. Spefton from East Lansing. He says, who are some of the top prospects to replace Tucker? He says, I'd like some names of coaches in their prime or approaching their prime rather than high achievers who are 55 or older. Okay, that's a fair comment. Clausen is what? He's like 50s, 54. That's somebody I've got my eye on. Been talking about him. I know Mike Valenti's been talking about Tom Herman. Herman's a talented coach. Had some issues at Texas with Michigan State and what they've gone through and what they just went through. They're going to want to go squeaky clean. They're not going to be bringing in Chris Beard, basketball coach, or Bobby Petrino, or Hugh Freeze, those type of situations. Herman is not quite in that category. Some people say, I don't know enough about it. I've got to look into it more, but certainly a talented coach. I don't know if it's a fit. Michigan State, some people at Michigan State have been interested in P.J. Fleck in the past, but P.J. Fleck, good coach, but you're getting into a price tag up $7-8 million a year. And one thing about Michigan State and the Mel Tucker situation, there was a lot of moaning and groaning at the administrative level after that contract went into place. Some people that were not in favor of it, and then other board members that may have come in afterwards, or people in the periphery around outside the board members, people that are opinion leaders and that type of thing at Michigan State. A lot of moaning and groaning about that contract. And I got to say, when there was the talk about LSU coming after Mel Tucker in 2021. After Michigan State beat Michigan, at the time, initially I was like, well, that there might be some truth to that. But as that thing went along, I'm like, no, that's one of those deals where the agent talks to his friends in the media and they push it out there, and then everybody wins. The agent gets his client a panic contract. The people in the media win because they've done the work for the agent in this case, and then in the future, when people in the media want to know what's going on contract-wise, they talk to the agents because the agents know, and then the agents will tip them off on, they're looking at this guy for real, or this is going on, or watch, this guy's about ready to sign a free agent, whether it be NBA, NFL, whatever. You do a favor for an agent one way, then favors come the other way. That was a deal to get Michigan State to panic. LSU, I've said this before, I don't think they were ever serious about Mel Tucker at all. He might have been on the list, but certainly not the way, I think it was CBS that came out and it was like, we have heard that in Baton Rouge from great sources that LSU is going to make a huge run at Mel Tucker. Panic, panic, panic. It was never that. Michigan State reacted to that. Michigan State had some big donors with a lot of power at the time, and cheese, I don't mean power in terms of making things happen, but ready to donate to the program, got that around, made it happen. As soon as I heard that they had signed with Tucker, I was like, well, that's good for Michigan State. They signed him. Then I heard the contract, and my first thought was, that's not good for Tucker. You're 11-2. That's great. You just signed a contract that's an 11-1 contract, and anything less than 11-1, there's going to be grumbling. That's just the way it is. Now, he had the big score. Should have set him up for life. Remains to be seen what happens there. So, in some ways, you are worth whatever somebody's willing to pay you. I thought Michigan State overcorrected, overdid it. A lot of people did. It was a show of program strength that they wanted to get behind the coach at that time. LSU was not serious about it. However, shortly thereafter, Oregon's head coach, Mario Cristobal, took the job at Miami. And although LSU, I don't believe, was serious about Tucker, Oregon would have been. So one way or another, Michigan State was probably going to have to pay at least $6.5 million a year, up towards $7 million probably, to keep him. $9.5 million for 10 years. That ended up hurting Mel Tucker, in my opinion, because I thought because there'd be pressure and so forth, but internally at the administrative level, there were grumbles as well. Did that have anything to do with all this stuff? I don't know. But once you've done a contract like that, that's in a roundabout way, that's what I was getting to. Once you've done a contract like that and there was negative feedback about it at the administrative level, the chances of going out and getting somebody like a P.J. Fleck at $7, $8, $9 million a year out the window after what they just went through. Usually when something fails, and it didn't necessarily fail on the field, it failed for reasons everybody knows about. When something fails, and the backdrop of that was this contract, this albatross that people in the Michigan State administration were not thrilled about. When something fails, the tendency for the next hire is to try to go 180 degrees away from that. If an offensive-minded coach fails, next coach is going to be a defensive-minded coach type of thing. All right. So that big contract, and a lot of those people in back rooms and back channels have been moaning about it for a long time. 3 months later, if you show this contract to them later, they're going to balk about they've just complained about this huge contract. Now, are the board of trustees, are they going to approve another big contract? In other words, going out and paying huge money for somebody? I don't know. That's where you get into some of these other candidates. Chris Kleeman at Kansas State, very good candidate. Was great at North Dakota State. He's been good at Kansas State. He's had like one good year, but everything looks like it's churning pretty well there. I think he's making about $4 million a year at Kansas State. Anyway, can you go to get a Big Ten coach like PJ Fleck. I don't think PJ Fleck is a serious thing here. I'm just using him as an established, successful example of someone that you'd have to pay a lot of money to get him to come to Michigan State. I don't think Michigan State's in position. They might not have the money to do it after Tucker gets his settlement, and I think there will be a settlement. But also, philosophically, I think there's going to be some resistance to that. Kleeman, if you're going to get him away from Kansas State, he's making $4.5 million right now, so you're going to have to pay him $6.5 million probably. I've talked to other people, and they're like, man, he'll leave Kansas State. That place is second rate. I don't think it is second rate. He's done a good job there. Here's the other thing: he can stay at Kansas State right now, get a raise, and he's in a cake conference compared to the Big Ten. The Big 12 is losing Texas and Oklahoma. Yeah, they're bringing in BYU and some of these other, Utah, whatever, Colorado. You can stay at Kansas State, get a raise, flirt with Michigan State, get $6 million, stay there, play a Kansas State schedule, and have access to the playoff. Or you go to Michigan State for $6-7 million if they want to pay you, and you're dealing with Michigan, Ohio State, and now USC, Washington, Oregon, and all that stuff. Everyone's like, go get Kansas State's coach. Has he been to East Lansing? Has he seen it? Some coaches will come to East Lansing because they've been there and they see what it can be and what it is. Nick Saban, Mark D'Antonio. But if you've not been there, I don't know if Cleveland's been around a whole lot. Is there an allure there? Don't overestimate Michigan State's chances of going down there and getting him for those reasons. I think he's a great candidate, but I don't know. Dave Clawson, all kinds of success, overachieving at some of these programs. Very interesting guy, cerebral guy, academic guy, intellectual guy. Reminds me of, he's like somewhere between Mike Krzyzewski and Coach K. Mike Krzyzewski and Jim Tressel. Interesting guy. He's making $3.6 million at Wake Forest. I realize his overall record is 60-53, but the rebuilding jobs he's done at various programs, he's done it at 1, 2, 3, 4 different schools. He goes to Fordham, his old alma mater, starts out 0-11 in 1999. And just, he's 54 years old, 55, 56 years old. So is he ready to move on? Does he want to? We'll get to that in a moment. Fordham, 0-11. Then he goes 3-8, 7-4, then 10-3, then 9-3, and moves on. So he's 29-29, but begins 0-11 with a terrible program in his last 2 years, 10-3 and 9-3. So the overall record, don't be fooled by that. Goes to Richmond, 3-8, 9-4, 6-5, 11-3. Division One AA semifinals, 11-3, and he moves on. So he took one program from nothing to 9-3. Then he took Richmond from nothing to 11-3, moves on, goes to Bowling Green in the Midwest. By the way, he's originally a New Yorker, New York State, upstate guy. Bowling Green, 7-6, 2-10, 5-7, 8-5, 10-3, moves on, wins the Little Caesars Bowl in 2013. Goes to Wake Forest. Wake Forest had success hiring from the MAC before with Jim Grobe. Goes to Wake Forest, where it's nearly impossible to win. Enrollment of 2,000, 3,000, limited finances. I hear he's got one big booster that's taking care of a lot of things, but it's Wake Forest. 3-9, 3-9, 7-6, 8-5, 7-6, 8-5. That's excellent at Wake Forest. And the last 8-5 I just mentioned was 2019 when he went against Mark D'Antonio. D'Antonio's last game, Pinstripe Bowl, New York, back and forth. Michigan State won, but that was a tough game. But going 7-6, 8-5, 7-6, 8-5 at Wake Forest, you are optimizing. You are, in terms of that program's potential, you are close to their ceiling, and he had them there. Then the COVID year, 4-5, everybody, COVID, throw that one out. Comes back the next year, 11-3. They go to the Gator Bowl. Finishes number 14 in the country, won the Gator Bowl at Wake freaking Forest. Last year, 8-5, Gasparilla Bowl. And now they're 2-0. They've looked good, but they lose their quarterback, Hartman. Does he want to go to a program where he doesn't have to worry about losing players as much? I realize Michigan State just lost Keon Coleman. Could he change that? All right, so Michigan State and what it is. His type of personality, he might look at Michigan State and all the history of what goes on with the Board of Trustees and everything that's going on, and he might, with his personality, he might say, no, thank you, I don't want any part of that. Or he might say, I can go there and be like Mark D'Antonio plus and iron the whole thing out and just save the situation. Why would he want to? You pay him more. Is he moved by money? I don't know. He's making about $3 million right now. Maybe he's not moved by money. You pay him $6 million. Does he listen? I don't know. He doesn't strike me as a guy that's going to extort Wake Forest to try to get more money. I don't know if Wake Forest has that. They've got their one big sugar daddy guy. I don't know. Secondly, I've kind of heard that he's kind of a Mark Few type of guy. Just Mark Few's always been willing to stay at Wake Forest or at Gonzaga. Maybe he's like that. I don't know, but it's worth a phone call. Are you interested? Might get a no right away. I don't know. Lance Leipold at Kansas, very good coach. Did a good job at Buffalo. He had a good year at Kansas, turning around a terrible program. They look pretty good this year. They've got a great quarterback. Took Illinois apart last week. He's 59 years old, so that's up there. So that's not ideal. Some of these other candidates that have had like one good season and look good and are worth keeping an eye on, Mike Elko at Duke had a good season last year. Very hard to win there. He's got it going. He was a good defensive coordinator at A&M. If he has another good season, yeah, that's a guy that you're very much you'd want to get involved with. You keep an eye on. These are people that you keep an eye on. And Elko, by the way, worked with he's a New Jersey guy that worked with Clawson at Fordham, at Richmond, at Bowling Green, at Wake Forest. Did Mike Elko. So it's interesting that Elko and Clawson are both from the same coaching tree as Matt, what's his name, at Iowa State. The bloom is off his rose a little bit. By the way, Matt, what's his name, over at Iowa State, he was the big guy back in 2020, and Michigan State reached out to him apparently, and he showed no interest and did so in a disrespectful manner. So there's coaches out there that would have that opinion of Michigan State, like it or not. So there's other guys, that are young and up and coming type of guys who the original poster right now says he's not interested in. But, some of those guys at a lower level, Jason Candle at Toledo, 43 years old. He's had some good years at Toledo and it went a little bit like this. He went back to 500. Then he had a really good season last year, I think 10-3. Keep an eye on Toledo. They really should have beaten Illinois in the first game. But Jason Candle's an interesting one to keep an eye on if you're looking for that next level. If you're not going to go out and go to another major conference and bring in a proven guy, and if Michigan State's not willing to pay $7 or $8 million, which I've not been told for sure that won't be the case, but I suspect it could be it could be the case. Keep an eye on that MAC level guy to bring up. Jason Candle, Charles Huff at Marshall. Keep an eye on Chris Creighton. If he has another good year at Eastern, I'm telling you, that guy's a good coach. A lot of people in state would be like, oh, he's an in-state guy. They have an idea of some other nameless, faceless guy from far away that can do a great job. But he's a good coach, and he should get a job somewhere. I'm surprised he doesn't have a job already. People talk about Jim Leonard, defensive coordinator at Wisconsin last year. Last year, Wisconsin's defense was number 10 in the Big Ten. The year before that, they were number 1 in the Big Ten. But Jim Leonard was interim coach last year. They went 3-3. They didn't keep him. But Leonard, he'll end up somewhere. Does he? Is he a guy that you want on the interview list? Maybe. I like Jonathan Smith a lot at Oregon State. Very impressive. He's making $2.4 million in a stadium that only seats 35,000. Problem is, he's a Corvallis guy. Oregon State's his alma mater. It's a very tough time for Oregon State right now, getting abandoned by the Big 12 or by the Pac-12, becoming dissolved. Although technically they're working to keep the Pac-12 together as a brand. They'll bring in Mountain West one way or another. Basically, it's glorified Mountain West. But their money is going to be, what they can pay him is going to be really down and low. But he's a Corvallis guy. Oregon State's in a problem where they need him. Will he feel compelled to stay there and help them see it through? I suspect so. I love Jonathan Smith. I just don't, getting him to leave his alma mater would be really difficult, I think. Narduzzi's going to be interested. I don't know if Michigan State would go in that situation. He thinks he could come here and do some damage. They won't talk about it at Pittsburgh, but I think he would like it. Am I being unfair to Harlan Barnett? I don't mean to be. But right now, Michigan State has an opening at quarterback, at the coaching position. And they're looking at everybody. And they're looking at Barnett, and they're looking at all these other people too. So, you guys know the names. In terms of coordinators, Brian Hartline, wide receivers coach at Ohio State, great recruiter. A lot of people are high on Jake Dickert at Washington State. He's had like 1 7-6 season. He's been there for 3 years. I don't know much about him, but people have been talking about him on the message board. People talk about Bill O'Brien, coaching at Penn State, goes to Alabama. Now he's, coordinator with the Patriots. Interesting one. Jamie Chadwell at Liberty, a little bit of a Southerner. They lost to Toledo in the bowl game. Tom Herman, that one comes up. It's interesting. But there'll be others that come up, and we'll be talking about it over at SpartanMAG.com as we go along throughout the course of the season. Let me see if I can find some of these other. So those are some initially. And let's go over here to the comments and reactions. I don't know if there's other people that are. H. Morris says Dickert would be a good get. Based on what? He was an interim coach that held on to that job at Washington State when Rolovich was fired because he wouldn't get the COVID shot. And, Jake Dickert, he's at Washington State, but same situation. He is a coach at a situation at a school that's going to have trouble that you can outfund them. And, he's 40 years old, young guy that promising coach, so he took over as an interim, went 3-3, and then last year went 7-6. Lost the Sun Bowl and then lost a bowl game last year. So 3-3, then 7-6. Not to disparage him, he may have a really great, bright future, but you put that resume in front of a lot of Michigan State fans, or you just mentioned you like him, 7-6. Is that better than if Harlan Barnett goes 7-5 this year? I'm just asking that question. I don't know. Jeff Evans asks, what about Urban Meyer? Urban Meyer would be great at Michigan State if he wanted to, but same situation after what Michigan State's been through and the problems Urban Meyer had as he left Jacksonville. That's just not going to – that wouldn't be realistic. He would do well, though, but like I said, this is not Ole Miss or Auburn. Sean Lewis, offensive coordinator at Colorado, was at Kent State as a head coach. He has head coaching experience in the Midwest, which is good. And that offense at Colorado looks great, obviously. It's the talk of college football, the talent they've put together there. You'd have liked him to do better at Kent State. His last 2 years there, he was 7-7 and 5-7. And the thing about the MAC is it's a great proving ground because I could be wrong about this, but all of those programs are pretty much equal recruiting base, somewhat equal in backing and support and resources. Now, I get it. There's more backing at Miami of Ohio in terms of fans than there is in Ypsilanti. But it's a great proving ground because it's equal. And the coaches that rise in that conference, that's a great proving ground. Sean Lewis was at Kent State for 5 years, and his final season there, it was 5-7, just not quite good enough. Jeff Evans says, Mark D'Antonio. Mark D'Antonio, when this all happened on Sunday, I did not discount that as a possibility. What is he, 69 years old? That's the same age, or 60, 67? That's the same age as when Bill Snyder went back to Kansas State. That's the same age as when Mac Brown went to back to North Carolina. I did not discount that as a possibility, but I've not heard any indication that that he would want to do that. I think he is fully behind Harlan Barnett. So in case something else happens, maybe that could change. I don't know where he is energy-wise and all that stuff. But I didn't discount it on Sunday, but I think there's less of a chance there now. But like I said, similar to Bill Snyder and Mac Brown, it's a Band-Aid. It's not a long-term solution. Elko's very interesting, good age. The things he's doing at Duke is catching a lot of people's eyes, and he will be in demand. Question is, is Michigan State, would he want to see that as his next step? There's some people that see Michigan State as a destination place where they think they can do everything as a coach that they dream to be. When Urban Meyer was at Bowling Green, he thought that about Michigan State, but would he have had great success and then left in 4 or 5 years right after that? Maybe. Urban Meyer told someone at Michigan State, in retrospect, that he would have walked to Michigan State from Bowling Green to take that job. Michigan State never talked to him. That's when Ron Mason was running the coaching search after Bobby Williams was fired. So there's some people in the Midwest that see what Michigan State could be. Nick Saban did. Now that's a generation ago. Now, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, Michigan State was strong financially compared to others because there was only 14 teams in the Big Ten, and there were only 14 teams getting Big Ten money. And Michigan State is not Michigan, Ohio State, or Penn State, but it's right there in that next echelon with Iowa and Wisconsin. Urban Meyer told a Michigan State person that in his estimation, Michigan State is above Iowa in terms of natural football resources. That was when someone from Michigan State called Urban Meyer during the coaching search that led to D'Antonio getting hired to ask Urban Meyer about Charlie Strong. And they asked Urban Meyer, what do you think about Michigan State? At that time, Urban Meyer was head coach at Florida. Now, Urban Meyer's a Midwestern guy from Ashtabula, Ohio, so his viewpoint on Michigan State might be stronger than what Jonathan Smith might think about Michigan State, or Mike Elko. Mike Elko's a guy from New Jersey, 46 years old. He coached at Bowling Green, so he's been in the Midwest a little bit. He was a defensive coordinator there for 4 years with Clausen. So he knows the Midwest. It's not like he'd be coming from a different region altogether, but these coaches and their thought about when they think Michigan State, what do they think? That's a key in all this. Do they think clown show, or do they think I can win there? And that's the initial thing, and that's gonna. And I don't know what that is for some of these coaches. All right, let's go back to some other questions. We're going to wrap this up because my voice is failing. We've been going for 2 hours already. Brian from Flushing, Michigan says, any indication that Jared Mangum plays this weekend? That's the running back transfer from South Florida. Or Barberin, is he ready for a role if healthy? Barberin's very fast. He's not been on the field yet. I don't know if he's healthy. You saw at the end of the Richmond game after Davion Prim fumbled and Jordan Simmons fumbled, they went to walk on Joseph Martinez. So that tells you right there, for whatever reason, Barberin was not available. Either they don't think he's ready, doesn't know the assignments, or there's a health situation. I'm not sure. But Mangum, they're still working on it. I'm not sure if he's any closer. Sola in Westland, Michigan says, what do you think will be the best way to slow down Washington defensively? We just went through that with Ron Big Movie Armstrong. Bellison 50 from Parts Unknown says, he doesn't have a question. Dave from Bethesda, Maryland says, question for Big Movie. Oh, he went back and edited this. Originally, Dave from Bethesda was talking about Crowley Sullivan being a lead singer for a house band in college, but now he's stricken that from the record and says, question for Big Movie. When you travel to stadiums, yeah, he's asking a question about playing surface, and I was going to ask him about grass. I think I did. Maybe I didn't, because that's been talked about in the Washington press conferences. But he wanted to ask, when you've gone to different playing surfaces, how much of a factor was it for you? Is it just a matter of getting the right cleat size or shoe, or are there other factors that exist, such as perhaps getting out of sync on timing of plays? Because the surface you're asking about, I don't know that. I didn't play. But I tell you what, Penn State, when Michigan State played at Penn State, I think the COVID year, Michigan State showed up that day with the wrong shoe. They were slipping and sliding all over the place. I don't know if it was the length of the grass, the dirt, or the temperature of the dirt, or what. Football cleats, I don't know if they still do, but for a lot of years you could change the cleats, the length of them on the sideline. And that used to happen back in the 90s and 80s. Go down to the sideline. They're changing their cleats. Nike, some of the shoes now, it's a set cleat and you don't change them. I asked Mel Tucker about that after the game on a Zoom interview the following Monday, and he didn't really give much of an answer on it. And I never got a chance to ask him kind of semi off the record about that. Some of these coaches they're very leery about saying anything bad about Nike because Nike supports a lot of these programs big time. So you don't, if he was upset with the shoe, he wasn't going to say it in a press conference. I do remember way back in like 96 or 97, Saban was talking about it. And he was saying, and this is long enough ago, so whatever. Sometimes off the record is always off the record. Sometimes there's a statute of, the table, the shelf life on things. But he was complaining off the record at the time about Michigan State having to use a Nike football. That was back in like 97. He thought that when the ball got wet, it didn't perform as well as other footballs, namely the Wilson football back in the 90s. Back then, you might remember Michigan was a Nike flagship station. Actually, Michigan State was not yet a Nike school, but they were using a Nike football. Maybe they had just become a Nike school. Is that possible? No, because they were still Reebok in 2000 basketball-wise. Anyway, Michigan State contractually was using a Nike football, and Saban didn't like it. It would get wet. It didn't work well. The Wilson football was better in the rain. Michigan was one of the flagship Nike schools at the time. They still are. But Michigan used a Wilson football, and that bothered Saban. It's a long time ago, but that's not going to be on the record back then because, again, like I just said, coaches don't want to disparage Nike. But the shoe situation in that Penn State game back in 2020, go look at it. Michigan State got out-shoed on that game. Would have lost anyway, probably. Penn State was okay. And Bill from Byron Center says, Jim, will you be getting any sleep Saturday night following a come-from-behind overtime thriller? So Will Bean is calling an overtime thriller on Saturday night. Sparty from Pawleys Island, South Carolina says, Jim, assuming Harlan Barnett ends up being the permanent head coach, parentheses, not sure what percent chance that might be, on parentheses, and the current staff remains pretty much intact, would you expect much roster turnover or any losses in current commits? Also, right there, no. I mean, if Harlan Barnett coaches well enough and they win and he keeps the job, I think the commitments, they've got, 13 commitments right now. I would expect, I don't know, arbitrary number, 8, 9 would probably remain. And then they would fill that back in with some pretty good ones if that happens. He says, also, I had been expecting more of an impact from Tumise Adeleye than we have seen so far, as he's still just learning the system. Thanks for all you do. Tumise Adeleye, transfer from Texas A&M. We told you in the preseason here in SpartanMAG.com, don't expect too much. He got a lot of press attention. He was a big-time transfer, former 5-star recruit. And I said over and over, he had only played 2 football games the previous 4 seasons. I think it was his junior year he got hurt. His senior year in high school was COVID, didn't have a season. The next year he redshirted A&M. And then last year he plays 2 games. It was an ankle sprain injury, shuts it down, transfers. Those were the only 2 games he's played since like 2018, going back to like his junior year in high school. So, and even when speaking with Adeleye, good kid, humble, and you could pick up on it that he even said to me one time, in a quote, he was like, I'm just, hoping to show that I'm everything that, I can't remember what the rest of the quote was. There's something along the lines of everything I'm expected to be or everything I think I am. I'm going to show that I'm everything they say that I am. In other words, it was optimistic, but he didn't know. All right. And he got off to a little bit of a slow start in the spring, finished spring pretty well. I thought he looked good in the spring scrimmage in terms of controlling people and disengaging. So he's got that strength, which is nice. But yeah, I predicted that he would not start. I had Bogle in the starting lineup, and that's what happened. So I'm not surprised that there's been it's been a slow development. He's brand new. He's a rookie. Nothing against him. Let's see here. So I'm not surprised that he had those problems. It's not problems, it's just a learning situation. Jay Bannon says, have you heard any rumors about players that may leave the team or decommit? I mean, I've heard that players have been getting bombarded from other programs. Hey, when it's time and you get in the portal, think about us. That's just the way it's going to be. Marlo asks, can we piggyback this and add Alante Brown to the list in terms of whether he's going to play? I have not heard. That'd be a nice sign if he did play. If he doesn't play, there's something that'd be worrisome a little bit. I'm going to sign off here. That's pretty much going to do it. Someone asked me about what Barnett needs to do to keep the job. I'm guessing a good-looking, disciplined, organized, competitive 6-6 would get him an interview? And do they get to the point where this comes down to interviews? Do interviews even still happen? To an extent, they do. 7-5, if it's a good-looking, organized, competitive 7-5, and what I mean by competitive is being competitive against Washington, competitive against Ohio State, which is something Michigan State has rarely done. Not many teams are competitive against Ohio State. But you go 7-5 and you play well against Ohio State, you look like you got good control, you'll have an interview and you'll be one of the top 3 candidates. 8-4, I think the job's his. Might not like to hear that. Some people would be very happy to hear that. That's just my guess. Someone said, well, yeah, if he goes 9-3, he'd have to be considered. Dude, if he goes 9-3, he's Big Ten Coach of the Year. If he's 9-3, he's Big Ten Coach of the Year. Not going to happen. But it's his chance. We'll see. Maybe he'll surprise some. But he's got an opportunity. And a lot of times when an interim coach has a chance, they are taking over a job where the team has failed to that point in the season. It's very hard to regroup it and get it going. Some of the interims that have gotten jobs, there is, Jake Dicker a couple years ago at Washington State. He went 3-3. They beat the Huskies. They hired him. And he did a good job keeping that thing together because not only did Rolovich get fired, but 4 other staff members did too. So he took over a job, down 4 coaches, and kept that together. So I mean, that was a good hire, right, for Washington State. So he did it. Dabo Swinney's a guy that was an interim head coach after Bowden was fired down there. And what did he do? I think he went like 4-2. He beat South Carolina that year. His first year they went 4-3, and they hired him, Dabo Swinney. And the rest is history. That year, they were 4-3. Bowden was fired. Tommy Bowden. Dabo Swinney comes aboard, and they lose their first game to Georgia Tech. They end up going 4-3. They beat Boston College, so what? They lost to Florida State, 41-27. Then they beat Duke, 31-7, so what? They beat Virginia, 13-3, so what? Then they beat South Carolina, 31-14, and they hired him. Went to a bowl game, lost to Nebraska. So, and he was a guy that was never a coordinator. He was just like a carnival barker. So they kept him on as a recruiter, CEO. I'm sure there were people at Clemson that thought that was a bad move. Turned out to be a great move, national championship move. Now I know they've gone a little bit downhill since then, and their heyday's probably over. But great list of, that's an interim guy that they hit the home run. I've made the point that, a lot of these guys, Scott Frost, when he was hired at Nebraska, that was a no-brainer. That was the best coach they could possibly hire. And it went down the tubes. I never would have thought that, right? He was obviously the best coach, right? Matt Luke at Ole Miss, I don't think he was interim head coach, but they hired from within after Hugh Freeze was fired? Is that what it was? So they kept him on. He goes 6-6, 5-7, 4-8, fired, right? But he was never he never coached as an interim. So others, I'm sorry about all the pauses here. I'm just trying to refresh my memory on history. Yeah, that was after Ole Miss. Well, he was 0-7. I think Matt Luke did come on as an interim. Anyway, that was an emotional hire, and that didn't work out so well. Others, Dabo Swinney, Jake Dickert's done okay so far. Matt Luke, Bobby Williams. Bobby Williams actually had not coached. He was interim coach for a week getting ready for the bowl game. Then they made him the head coach, and he went and coached at the bowl game. They didn't hire him after the bowl game. He was the acting head coach after Saban left during the month of December. He went to the Citrus Bowl as the head coach. Bobby Williams never coached as the interim head coach. He ran a couple of practices as interim head coach, and in the meantime, they hired him. It didn't work out so well. Brent Key at Georgia Tech last year, interim head coach after Jeff Collins was fired. Brent Key was offensive line coach. He went 4-4 at Georgia Tech. They kept him. There have been others through the course of history. It's been a mixed bag. Dabo Swinney's been great in that regard, right? But for the most part, interim head coaches, because usually when an interim head coach is coaching, it's a program that has lost faith, and you're picking them up from the bottom. So last year, Jim Leonard, 3-3 at Wisconsin, and they did not keep him. So usually you're taking over a bad situation. At Michigan State, they're 2-0. Expectations are not high. Preseason expectations were 6-6, 7-5. So if you get to 7-5, I thought this year coming into the year that if Mel Tucker went 7-5 and showed competitiveness, had their crap together, organizational skills, physical, same pageness, you go 7-5 against that schedule. Okay, that serves well toward the future. That's not a record that correlates with the contract, but that money I knew was going to put pressure on him. But to me, it's still Michigan State. Even if you're giving him an 11-1 contract, and that's what that was, 9 million years. You're paying him to go 11-1, but it's not an 11-1 program. You would have to be great to go 11-1, like D'Antoni did a couple times. But that's what they hold you to. So that's why that got a little screwy. But to me, getting to 7-5 and kind of rebuilding a little bit and recharging, schedule gets a little bit easier theoretically in the next couple of years. Maybe you can make a run at 8-3, 9-4. And do something better. I know a lot of you, especially that are like 35 and younger, are like, what are you talking about 8-4? We want 11-1. We want to go to the Final Four. I know you grew up in the Izzo era. I know you grew up in the D'Antonio era with, 3 straight top 5 finishes. But if you start demanding that and expecting that and firing coaches for not achieving that, you'll end up with a 20-year run like Tennessee just had. But they look like they found the right coach, but they were in the wilderness for a while. Or like when Indiana fired Bill Mallory for going 8-4, then the next 3 years they were in the toilet. I think Michigan State's good, but expecting 11-1 or bust, you can get in a lot of trouble. I think you need to remember who you are in some points. I think we're going to sign off because my voice sucks. Brad Swihart says, I think Deion Sanders comes to Michigan State for $9.5 million a year. I think he would too. But I don't think Michigan State's paying $9.5 million a year. And if you have him and he does well, you've only got him for a couple of years before he goes somewhere else. That would infuse a lot of excitement and it'd be worth it. But I just don't think Michigan State's going to pay that much. However, if you call him and he says, yeah, I'll come to Michigan State for 9.5, maybe the board would go along with it. They'd pass the hat. They'd get it done. I guess I've talked myself into it. Do you call him? Maybe you do. But I don't think that's based on the climate and the amazing, I don't want to say character he's become, the factor he's become. I don't think he would, but gosh, that guy's so unpredictable. Maybe he would. Remember when he was on draft day coming out of Florida State, there were thoughts that the Detroit Lions might draft him. Instead, Detroit drafted Barry Sanders. And then the Atlanta Falcons drafted Deion Sanders, I think, in the next pick. And I think Deion Sanders, I know his comment was, I'm glad Detroit didn't draft me because if they drafted me, I was going to ask for so much money, they were going to have to put me on layaway. Remember that? So that's what he thought about Detroit back then. So is it worth a call? Maybe. Yeah, it's worth a call. I mean, you got weeks and weeks and weeks to put this together. Maybe he'd say, yeah, how much money you want to pay me? Knowing Coach Prime, he'd probably want $11 million. I mean, if he's listening, I don't know. I mean, if he's listening to you talk money, as dynamic as he's been, and with the timing right now, I guess I've talked myself into it. Yeah, call him, see what he says. All right, we are going to wrap this up. I know there's been a lot of comments over here in the comments area, and I'm not going to have time to get to all of them. We've already gone for a couple hours. I know it's afternoon. You guys need to go back to work. It's good to see everybody coming in and being a part of the show, being a part of Spartan Mag Live. Remember to go over to SpartanMAG.com. We will have coverage later tonight about other things as they relate to Mel Tucker. We didn't talk much about the Mel Tucker situation today, and I mean that's all been talked about. I don't have much more to add to that. I do have a lot of opinions on it, but it's nothing that you haven't already heard and seen on other message boards. Maybe not seen it in the media, but whether it be Facebook or whatever, or what former Detroit high school coaches have said about the situation. Anyway, hey, appreciate everybody coming in on a Thursday afternoon in East Lansing and joining Spartan Mag Live. Everybody take care of one another, put your arms around each other, and have a good time on Saturday. Spartan fans, Michigan State graduates, I know a lot of you, and I know you're fired up and ready to support your institution. Your institution is a proud institution, regardless of the actions of one person. And that one person, by the way, always treated me real well, and I liked being around him, and he was fun. I liked him. None of us are perfect. And I hope there's safety and peace for all victims everywhere, those that are victims and survivors. I don't mean to say victims, I mean survivors. So I don't mean to disparage that at all. But Mel Tucker was nice to me. And you want to know the truth? I wish him the best. I hope he does well. I hope that he has peace. And everybody out there, get with your Michigan State friends and have a great weekend. And I'll see a lot of you on Saturday. I saw a lot of you tailgating last Saturday. If you see me walking by during tailgate, say hello. I might be in a hurry, headed to this tailgate or that tailgate to see old friends, and that's what it's about on football Saturdays in East Lansing. And it's there's no place like it in the Midwest when it comes to tailgating. Beautiful campus. Trees are beautiful right now, just starting to change. Beautiful buildings, beautiful green grass, natural field at the stadium. Beautiful, wonderful, venerable 100-year-old landmark of a stadium on the most beautiful campus, at least in the Midwest. So look forward to seeing people on campus. And that's not green and white rah-rah stuff. That's institutional, that's academic, that's Michigan State University. So thanks to those of you checking in. We'll see you again. Go to SpartanMAG.com, become a subscriber. Coverage throughout the weekend, and into the season. Take care. Everybody have a great weekend.